Chapter 351. Chinyu began to offer his sacrifice. The process wasn't any different from the first time. The only difference was that the good fortune tablet, or the South Shine Nation's old ancestor, gave him more magic power. Soon, the 5-element nascent souls erupted with divine light. They had reached their limit and were unable to absorb anymore. But with the dark golden light as a medium, pure magic power continued to pour into his body. Surprise flashed in Chinyu's eyes, but he didn't panic. This was because he was sure that whether it was the good fortune tablet or the South Shine Nation's old ancestor, neither of them would harm him right now. And indeed, as magic power continued to pour into his nascent souls, invisible shackles began to appear in the dark golden light. This shackling strength fell onto Chinyu's nascent souls. It was like layers upon layers of shackles, wrapping around them and giving them an extremely powerful withstanding ability. Thus, magic power continued to pour into the nascent souls. In a situation where the nascent souls were imprisoned and couldn't explode, the magic power began to condense. This was certainly a good thing. After condensing the magic power, the quality would greatly increase. Moreover, the nascent souls could free up space. But to Chinyu, this was an extremely refreshing enjoyment. The general feeling was like you were filled to the brim, but there was still a large hand that was trying to open your mouth and stuff it inside. And the key point was that you couldn't stop it and you could still eat it. It was only after an hour that the dark golden light faded away. When Chinyu was sent 30 feet away, he staggered and nearly fell down. The ground began to crack and crack. He turned around and retched. After a long time, he barely managed to calm down. Chief Steward Chin's eyes revealed a look of understanding. He had already guessed the old ancestor's thoughts. His eyes fell on Chinyu's back, a light flashing in his eyes that soon turned warm. Little friend, only by experiencing hardship can you rise above others. Your harvests today are enough to make countless proud children of heaven envious. Chinyu cupped his hands together and weakly nodded. He naturally knew that what the other party said was the truth. This was because he was still at the 9th level of nascent soul. But the difference between his current 9th level nascent soul and his previous cultivation was as great as the heavens and earth. In terms of pure magic power, he was at least twice as strong as before. This was because the good fortune tablet was consolidating his foundation. If Chinyu told others in the future that he walked the Golden Core faction, no one would believe him. Nonsense, with your sturdy concrete foundation, saying that it was built up by the accumulation of medicinal pills. Who are you trying to bluff? Disregarding everything else, just this foundation alone was enough for him to compare with the top proud sons of heaven within the land of divinity and demons. And the more solid one's foundation was, and the deeper one's background was, the greater the increase in one's combat strength would be when they broke into the divine soul realm. This was simply an opportunity that countless cultivators yearned for even in their dreams. Unfortunately, only the most valued descendants of the superpowers had the qualifications to enjoy it. This was because one needed to be at least a peak Blue Sea Realm superpower house to have the qualifications to act. Moreover, this would have a certain influence on one's cultivation. The South Shine Nation's old ancestors' rewards were truly generous, but what a pity he didn't have any good intentions. After completing the sacrifice, the soreness in his body was alleviated as his cultivation rose. But his soul was still filled with exhaustion. He suppressed the discomfort and his thoughts raced. Lord Chief Steward, this junior is very tired. I will bid my farewells first. There was a hint of hesitation in his eyes. Qin Wushang furrowed his eyebrows. Ning Qin, is there something you need? Chinyu forced out a smile. No. Watching him leave, Chief Steward Qin's thoughts raced. He felt that something wasn't right with Ning Qin's performance. White Feng had been waiting outside the entire time. When Chinyu came out, his eyes flashed. He said, "Since you're waiting here, come with me." The two didn't speak. They returned to Chinyu's residence. After the door closed, Chinyu took out 9th province and sat down on the sofa. He smiled and said, "Sit." White Feng's eyes turned red. "Big brother Bao Yu, your hair Woo-woo. How could it be like this? Qin was a bit moved. Although White Fengfeng's actions were inexplicable, he could still judge whether or not she was sincere. He smiled and said, "It's fine. I just lost a bit of my lifespan for a short period of time. It will slowly recover." He hesitated for a moment and said, "Miss White, what I am about to tell you, whether or not you believe me, I hope you can keep it a secret." Seeing her nod, Qin slowly said, "If you haven't refined the revival good fortune pill yet, then it's best if you don't. This is my advice." White Fengfeng nodded. "All right, I won't refine it." Qin was surprised. White Fengfeng earnestly said, "I believe in Big Brother Bao Yu. You absolutely won't harm me." Qin revealed a gratified look. Although this girl's eyes gave him a bit of a headache, it was still a good feeling to be trusted by someone. To speak with such a beautiful girl who trusted him completely, even if he didn't harbor any other thoughts, it was still enough to make him feel happy. Unfortunately, Qin current state meant that he urgently needed to rest. He forced a smile and said, "Then let's do this. I need a rest for a bit." White Fengfeng reluctantly bid her farewells. She vowed that she would definitely find a treasure that could restore her lifespan and allow her big brother Bao Yu's hair to turn black once more. What a naive little fellow. As he thought about how he was still casually using a fake name to interact with her, Qin rubbed his nose and revealed a bit of embarrassment. But now wasn't the time to be embarrassed. What he really needed was a good rest. He leaned back and sank into the soft sofa. After choosing a comfortable position, Qin let out a light breath and closed his eyes, falling asleep. This sleep lasted for a day and a night. When Qin woke up, it was deep in the night. In the darkness, his eyes flashed with a brilliant light. He looked up at the clock on the wall. The time wasn't wrong. In other words, there were 6 more days before the world-killing tribulation would arrive. Although he had already determined this, Qin still couldn't help but feel a bit nervous. He took a deep breath, his thoughts racing as he pondered over the entire plan. For hours later, Qin let out a long breath. He stood up and walked into the bathroom. After washing up, he dressed himself and stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows. He reached out and pulled open the curtains. A hazy white light shined in. The eastern sky was bright, and a new day was about to begin. Soon after, there was a knock on the door. Qin opened it, and, as expected, it was Qin Wushang. The Lord Chief Steward warmly smiled. "I heard from a maid that little friend had opened the curtains, so I knew you had woken up. I hope I didn't disturb you." Qin cupped his hands together. "Chief Steward is too serious. Please enter." He turned to the side and invited him in. As he closed the door behind him, a sharp light flashed in Qin eyes. Now, it was time to show off his acting skills. Although he was lacking in shamelessness compared to these old things, after experiencing so many shady things, in terms of pure acting, he had some confidence in himself. Moreover, he had already prepared this play. Qin Wushang had no idea that he had already taken the lead. He asked Chief Steward Qin to sit down. Qin was silent for a moment. Then he said, "If Chief Steward is here today to persuade me to continue refining the revival good fortune pill, then there is no need to say anything more." Qin Wushang's complexion was calm, as if he weren't surprised at all. He nodded. 200 years of life. To a nascent soul cultivator, that is a quarter of their lifespan. It truly cannot be ignored. But once one breaks into divine soul and senses the rules of the great Tao, the loss of one's lifespan will slow down according to one's comprehension of the great Tao. A divine soul cultivator has a lifespan of 1,600 years, but there are many people that live past 3,000 years. Compared to 3,000 years, 200 years was naturally insignificant. Qin revealed a bitter expression. He slowly shook his head. "In truth, it isn't because of my lifespan," Qin Wushang frowned. Qin reply was unexpected. Although he had brought a condition that this junior couldn't refuse, he still felt a trace of unease in his heart. "Why?" Qin shook his head, his complexion paling. "Chief Steward, there is no need to ask. No matter what, this junior will not refine the revival good fortune pill again." Qin Wushang took a deep breath. "What if I tell you that the old ancestor has prepared a Davis soul for you?" Qin pupils shrank. He never imagined that the old ancestor would be willing to pay such a price. Deva's soul. It was said that any nascent soul could refine it and directly ascend to divine soul, to any cultivator below the divine soul realm. This was an unimaginable temptation. Qin Yu's breathing quickened. After a long time, he clenched his teeth and shook his head. Chief Steward Qin, this junior cannot agree. Qin Wushang had no expression. Ning Qin, do you think that my South Shine Nation isn't sincere enough? What do you want? Feel free to ask. Qin Yu bitterly smiled. On that day, this junior already obtained an astonishing amount from the treasury. So how could I dare to ask for more? It's just that I absolutely cannot refine the revival good fortune pill again. Seeing that Qin Yu didn't seem to be lying, Qin Wushang frowned. He stood up and said, "Very well. I will give you some time to consider." He turned and left. Chief Steward Qin suddenly remembered that when Qin Yu refined the pill yesterday, there seemed to be something wrong with him, and he didn't seem too happy about it. Did something really happen? He didn't dare to delay. He rode a carriage back to the royal palace and reported Qin Yu's response to the South Shine Nation's old ancestor on the underground altar. The South Shine Nation's old ancestor frowned. In the dim underground palace, the air suddenly thickened like a swamp. Ning Qin refused the Deva soul. Qin Wushang fell to his knees. Yes, this old servant carefully observed him. His performance was very sincere. You are saying that Ning Qin really doesn't want to refine pills again. That should be the case. Qin Wushang hesitated for a moment. Old ancestor, Ning Qin seems hesitant to speak, as if he is afraid of something. As he thought about it, he became increasingly certain. Now that I think about it, Ning Qin's performance seems to be faintly afraid of something. The South Shine Nation's old ancestor's eyes flashed with the light of thunder. Without any movement from him, a phantom suddenly walked out from a nearby oil lamp. In the blink of an eye, this phantom became solid, no different from a real person. It was an avatar that Qin Yu had seen before. I'm really curious. Just what is his reason for doing this? Qin Wushang left and returned. He brought with him a person that Qin Yu couldn't help but bitterly smile. Looking at the panicked expression on Qin Yu's face, the South Shine Nation's old ancestor faintly said, "Ning Qin, I didn't come here to force you to refine pills. Rather, I want you to give me a reasonable explanation." Qin Yu's complexion paled even more. He swept his eyes around with unease. It's not that I want to refuse, but I really don't dare to continue refining the revival good fortune pill. The South Shine Nation's old ancestor narrowed his eyes. Someone is threatening you. Chapter 352. Beads of sweat dripped down Qin Yu's forehead and his lips shivered. When combined with his pale complexion, he looked like a nervous wreck. If a normal cultivator were to see his current appearance and hear his words, they would likely think he was mentally deranged or that he was suffering from a late-stage persecutory delusion. But in front of him was an old monster that was unwilling to die after living for 100,000 years, an old monster that the heavens and earth didn't tolerate, as well as a servant that knew a little about the old monster. So, Qin Yu's words gave them far too many shocks and associations. The South Shine Nation's old ancestor maintained his composure. He lightly said, "What did you feel when you spoke of those eyes?" Qin Yu blurted out, "Nowhere to run." The South Shine Nation's old ancestor closed his eyes and sighed inwardly. He already knew where Qin Yu's fear came from. The will of the world. It was because he had experienced the terror of those invisible eyes. That feeling of nowhere to run was something that only someone who had personally experienced it would be able to speak of without hesitation. This seemed like an absurd judgment, but one couldn't forget that the South Shine Nation's old ancestor had already experienced a world-killing tribulation that targeted Ning Qin. In the past, the world had tried to kill Ning Qin, but he had been saved by him. Now, could it feel that his life would be extended once more? So it was impatient to attack again. After a long time, the South Shine Nation's old ancestor opened his eyes. Within his deep eyes, two ghostly flames seemed to burn. His voice was even colder, carrying with it a chill that penetrated into the soul. You want to destroy my hope? Then let's fight. Let's see if you can kill me, or if I can continue living. He looked at Chinyu. I guarantee you that no matter what happens, you will not be harmed. So, I hope that you can refine another revival good fortune pill. As if he could see Chinyu's thoughts, the South Shine Nation's old ancestor lifted a finger. One last pill. I only ask that you refine one last one. Besides the Davis soul, I will lend you another supreme treasure. He traced his wrist and took out a bracelet. It was pitch black all over and had a thick layer of paste wrapped around it. Faint traces of light constantly circulated around it, emitting the aura of endless years. This is a supreme treasure of my royal family. If you wear it, it can block any attack below the calamity immortal realm. Ningqin, do you agree? Qin Yu's complexion turned blue. He stared at the bracelet, a fierce struggle of emotions in his eyes. Perhaps not even he thought he would be able to place himself in such a realistic situation. After a long time, he shivered and nodded. Junior agrees. The South Shine Nation's old ancestor laughed. Good, then rest for now. When it's time to refine the pill, I will personally oversee it. Let's see just who can harm you. An invisible aura soared into the skies, as if an invisible hand was stabbing into the skies above the capital city. In that instant, thunder rumbled and thunder roared, and endless black clouds interweaved. His imposing manner was truly unparalleled. Chinyu seemed frightened. He bowed his head in awe, but deep in his eyes, there was a trace of relaxation. Success! As he looked at the South Shine Nation's old ancestor who was looking down upon the world with disdain, the fear in his heart subconsciously dissipated by a great deal. After all, no matter how high your cultivation is, in the end, you still suffered a loss in front of this young master. After a series of responses, he had finally finished his preparations before the world-killing tribulation arrived. Then, all that was left was to rely on his luck and luck. During this period of time, there was no danger at all. In fact, it could even be said that he had obtained great harvests. His luck could be considered very good. Chinyu hoped that his luck would continue to be good and that it wouldn't come to an end. After leaving behind the Davis soul, the South Shine Nation's old ancestor left. For the next 3 days, there was no change on the surface in the capital city, but there were already turbulent undercurrents. The top circles of nobles and aristocrats all sent out orders at the same time. They strictly restrained their cultivators and told them not to stir up trouble. Although they didn't know what had happened, they were able to find out just how tense the current situation was through the clues. For instance, the 81 protective array formations of the capital city began to quietly charge up. For instance, the security level of the royal palace began to rise as personnel were mobilized several times. And for instance, those Dark Knight Division spies that had been acting as low-key as shadows now dared to openly rampage through the streets of the capital city, their faces filled with vicious expressions. There had to be something, and it was something major. After Ming Siyuan and Yuan Tiangang entered the South Shine Nation's capital city, they were respectfully invited to the royal family's side courtyard. There was no need to mention how careful and considerate they were. Of course, although the two of them didn't seem to leave, they each had their own channels to receive news and were paying close attention to the matter of the revival good fortune pill. Incidentally, the two of them were also paying attention to the changes in the capital city. Sensing the changing situation, Ming Siyuan and Yuan Tiangang furrowed their eyebrows. At the same time, a thought appeared in their minds. Could this be related to the reactivation of the revival good fortune pill? Then, they thought of Chinyu. That long gray hair was something they had already seen in the pictures secretly transmitted to them. Through the summary and analysis of the information, it wasn't hard to discover that Chinyu was the key to this matter. Ming Siyuan and Yuan Tiangang were suspicious. Just as they were about to take action, Yin Ilan pushed open the courtyard doors. He smiled and ordered for a banquet to begin, pulling the two blue C's to their seats. During the banquet, there was singing and dancing. Countless delicacies and wines were served. and the air was filled with leisure. Yuan Tiangang drank a cup of wine. His eyes flashed. Revered Yun, I haven't come to the capital city for many years, but I do have some old friends. Are you planning on visiting them today? This wasn't a clever probe, but through Yun Ilan's response, he was able to see some depths. Ming Xiyuan put down his wine cup and looked over. Yun Ilan clapped his hands and sent the dancers and singers away. Revered Yuan, revered Ming, I don't like to beat around the bush, so I will get straight to the point. The reason I came here today is because I hope that the two of you can go into seclusion in the courtyard for several days. Yuan Tiangong's smile didn't fade. Revered Yun, what is the meaning of this? Yun Ilan smiled. It is the meaning of my words. Ming Xiyuan put down his wine cup with a light thud. Exalted Yun, do you want to place us under house arrest? Although his words were light, they were cold. In an instant, they tore apart the light breeze and drizzle, leaving behind only an icy chill. Yun Ilan's smile finally vanished. He was silent for several breaths of time and then sighed. This is the old ancestor's intention. There is no need for the two of you to make things difficult for me. As expected, this was related to the South Shine Nation's old ancestor. Yuan Tiangang revealed a solemn expression. Very well, I agree. Yun Ilan cupped his hands together. I thank revered Yuan for understanding. Regarding this, he wasn't surprised. If the old ancestor spoke, even a blue sea revered wouldn't dare to oppose him. Otherwise, how could he dare to call himself the old ancestor? Ming Xiyuan coldly said, the South Shine Nation must guarantee the safety of my family's young master. If there is even the slightest mistake, the great desolate lake will not let this matter rest. Yun Ilan said, of course. He smiled and raised his cup. For the next several days, I will also stay behind. I can use this time to verify with revered Yuan and revered Ming that we haven't finished yet. This was surveillance. 5 days after Qin Yu refined the second revival good fortune pill, there were still 2 days until the world-killing tribulation arrived. He could already clearly feel the annihilating aura that covered his soul. He opened his eyes from cultivation. After determining that he had just barely managed to control the magic power in his body, a sharp light flashed in his eyes. He decided to start refining the pill. If he waited any longer, he would only be able to delay for a day at most. He might as well take the initiative to attract the world-killing tribulation to descend. Perhaps he could disrupt its rhythm. He stood up and walked to the window. He pulled open the curtains and looked outside. At this time, the sun was setting in the west. Qin Yu calmed his breathing and adjusted his condition. When the last bit of light faded away and night fell, he turned and left. The reason he chose night was because of the little blue lamp. Only at night did it have the heaven-defying effect of turning something rotten into something magical. Even if it was only a guess, Qin Yu had to grasp it and raise his chances of survival to the highest possible level. Qin Wushang had already prepared the materials needed for the third revival good fortune pill. A moment later, Qin Yu arrived outside the alchemy room and saw the South Shine Nation's old ancestor. Unlike the old ancestor who was usually alone, there were 4 armored cultivators following behind him. They were fully armored, and even their faces were covered. A cold aura spread out from the bodies of these 4 people. But what was strange was that this aura didn't spread out but directly fused into space. It was like these 4 people had fused together with this space. Greetings, old ancestor. Qin Yu revealed a bit of peace, but his pale face could still feel the panic and unease in his heart. The South Shine Nation's old ancestor nodded. Refine the pill in peace. I will take care of everything else. Yes. Qin Yu strode into the alchemy room. The South Shine Nation's old ancestor lifted a hand. The 4 armored cultivators quietly dispersed, each standing at a corner of the alchemy room. Qin Wushang wanted to speak, but hesitated. The old ancestor lightly said, I have no choice. I must obtain the third revival good fortune pill. If he obtained it, he would be able to extend his lifespan by 100 years. He would be able to calmly make arrangements. Otherwise, the chances of success will be far too low. If it weren't for this, How could he have been willing to face the world's killing tribulation head-on? He looked up, his eyes piercing through all barriers and falling on the distant skies, as if he could feel some sort of oppressive aura in the skies above. The old ancestor's complexion became increasingly indifferent. Chinyu sat down cross-legged in the alchemy room. He flicked his sleeves and took out Ninth Province. He traced the bracelet on his wrist and then took out the tree branch that Ani Hong had given him at the inn. Without further delay, he flicked his sleeves and ignited the furnace fire. Surging heat billowed outwards. Chinyu released the third wave of consciousness from his soul and began to refine the pill. His progress was rapid. An hour later, the last set of materials was sent in. Chinyu allowed this consciousness to control the fire and complete the gathering of medicinal efficacy. Bang! Ninth Province opened, and the embryo revival good fortune pill flew out. It screamed and opened its mouth, biting down on Chinyu's fingertip. Now was the time. Ripples appeared in his pitch-black eyes. He lifted his other hand and grasped upwards, the phantom of a great sun appearing in front of him. Rumble, rumble. The capital city of the South Shine Nation, a land of peace and tranquility for 10,000 years. As the lanterns lit up at night, this was the most lively time of the day. Suddenly, a heaven-shaking thunderclap rang out from the highest heavens. Countless cultivators froze where they were, their minds shaking with endless fear. They fiercely looked up to discover that at this time, a bolt of thunder had pierced through the skies of the capital city. In particular, this thunder was a blinding red, or to be more accurate, it was the color of blood. In the dark night, it was incomparably eye-catching. Then, without warning, the dark curtain of night was broken apart. A ray of light appeared, tearing apart the darkness in a single breath of time. Yin and yang reversed. Night turned into day. There was no great sun, but the brilliant light of the great sun illuminated the entire capital city. And outside the capital city, the darkness became even deeper, like a thick and viscous sea of ink. Hashtag, 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 I'm sorry everyone, but there is only one update today. There are some problems at home, so tomorrow's update might be affected. I will try to update as soon as possible. For the fastest and error-free novel reading, please visit. Chapter 353. The outer walls of the South Shine Nation's capital were 1,000 feet high and hundreds of feet thick. It was like a giant dragon wriggling forward. Every set distance along the walls, there would be observation towers. At this moment, all the pagodas began to emit light. There were 81 pagodas like 81 stars, erupting with billions of rays of light. These rays of light did not rush into the sky. Instead, they condensed into a slanted beam of light that converged at a certain point in the capital city, as if a great sun had descended. Terrifying fluctuations of energy erupted from the point where the light gathered. Space began to distort as if it were being burned. Massive cracks began to appear in the air. Just looking at it caused a monstrous fear to rise up from the depths of one's soul. Countless cultivators in the capital city looked up in shock. It wasn't a secret that the capital city had a super protective array formation, but none of them thought they would see it with their own eyes one day. After all, with the current situation of the world and the strength of the South Shine Nation, unless the strongest nation in the land of divinity and demons took action, no one could reach the capital city and force it to open the Great Array Formation. What exactly happened? This thought appeared in the hearts of countless cultivators. But soon, they were no longer in the mood to care about the bewilderment in their hearts. Their attention was drawn to the eye that appeared in the skies. Then from their bodies to their souls, they were completely frozen. This was definitely not a pair of eyes that a living being could possess. They were several kilometers in size, and even though they were extremely far away, they could still be clearly seen. There wasn't the slightest bit of emotion. This huge eye was filled with endless indifference. It seemed as if it could see everything, yet also seemed as if it couldn't see anything. Then, under countless horrified gazes, a spot of blood appeared in the depths of the giant eye, and in the blink of an eye, it had spread to every corner of the eye. It moved ever so slightly, almost imperceptibly, as if it had found its target. Then, like a broken dam, an endless stream of blood flowed out, transforming into a perfectly straight beam of light that shot down from the highest heavens and slammed into the capital city's grand protective array. No one could describe this collision. The entire world seemed to stand still for a moment. Time, space, and all other dimensions lost their concepts. It was like all the air in his body had been sucked out. This feeling of emptiness made him want to roar, but he couldn't open his mouth, much less make a sound. At the same time, he felt as if a mountain was pressing down on his chest. That terrifying pressure made his heart feel like it was going to burst. The emptiness in one's heart and the heavy pressure outside one's body were two completely different feelings. It made one feel as if they were in a world of ice and fire, causing great harm. All the cultivators in the capital city who were exposed to the outside world, including those who were below the nascent soul stage, had blood flowing out of their 7 orifices at the same time and directly fainted. The nascent soul didn't faint, but it could only fall to the ground. Its face contorted in pain, and its body twitched. As for cultivators at the divine soul realm and above, their faces were as white as paper. Their eyes widened in shock. A divine soul cultivator could sense the rules of the world and could clearly feel the terrifying might contained within the collision. It was because of this that they were even more terrified. However, there was someone who could sense it more clearly than them. Within the imperial courtyard, Yin Ilan, Ming Xiyuan, and Yuan Tiangang, the 3 blue seas, were all tightly staring at the terrifying collision in the skies. His pupils shrank violently. The 3 of them could be considered veteran Blue Sea Realm superpowerhouses. With a combat strength above 300 dragons, as long as they didn't seek death on their own initiative, they could freely wander the land of divinity and demons. But at this time, all 3 of them simultaneously felt the threat of death. Although the capital city's grand array formation was terrifying, it was mostly used for protection. What truly caused their hearts to race was the blood-red beam of light that descended from those giant eyes. Even with their cultivations, they felt their scalps tingle as they sensed it. To a certain degree, Blue Sea Realm superpowerhouses had already begun to control the rules. This was why they felt an even greater fear towards those eyes. The world's will. This was the incarnation of the world's will. Just what had the South Shine Nation's old ancestor done? He had actually drawn down such a terrifying world, killing tribulation, and didn't hesitate to pay any price to kill him. Yinalon gripped his fists. As Ming Xiyuan and Yuan Tiangong's hearts trembled, the battle between the blood-red beam of light and the capital city's great array formation had already been decided. The winding dragon, like city walls of the capital city, began to tremble. Countless cracks appeared on them, and the great array formation lines were exposed as the nodes began to collapse one after another. Bang! The 81 array formation hubs collapsed together. The entire capital city walls completely collapsed. The blood-red pillar of light paused for a moment before continuing to advance towards its target. Below it, a square building rapidly grew larger. The blood-red light illuminated the densely packed army of 100,000 armored soldiers. Their entire bodies were covered in armor, and only their eyes were exposed. There was a cold glint in their eyes. Kill! With a loud roar, the 100,000 armored soldiers lifted their hands in unison. The sound of swords tearing through the air gathered into a heaven-shaking rumble. Where 100,000 swords pointed, space instantly collapsed. The cracks were smooth and flat as they cut towards the blood-red beam of light. Roar! With a cruel and ruthless roar, the blood-red light that was cut twisted and turned into a world-destroying blood dragon. It fiercely swung its tail to avoid the attack. The invisible sword intent collided with its scales. With loud crackling sounds, countless sparks flew out. Kill again. The roar was still icy cold, without the least bit of trembling. The 100,000 armored soldiers slashed out once more. A sword fell, 10,000 swords cried out. This sword strike was no longer a simple slash, but one that contained a supernatural sword art. A sword transforming into 10,000 swords wasn't too profound a supernatural sword art. In fact, it could even be called shallow. But any supernatural ability, after being superimposed 100,000 times, would experience a qualitative leap and possess the might to destroy the heavens and earth. Hum, the void trembled. In the next moment, it turned into a shattered mirror. The interweaving cracks split it into countless smaller pieces that covered the blood dragon. It was unavoidable. The blood dragon flicked its tail, using action to respond. It had no intention of dodging at all. Like this, it decisively broke into the shattered space. In that instant, countless heaven-shaking explosions sounded out. Trillions of sword lights tumbled about, and dreadful sword intent shot into the highest heavens. From every crack in space, a sword light erupted, cutting into the blood dragon's scales. Even if it had unimaginable defensive strength, large sections of its scales still broke apart and crisscrossed with wounds. But what left one's heart shaking was that the blood dragon didn't stop at all. It was like these sword lights weren't able to cause any real damage to it. It tore apart the net of swords, and with an unrivaled momentum, it descended onto the square buildings. Its icy, cold dragon eyes were filled with killing intent that could pierce through the world. Triple kill. The 100,000 armored soldiers turned their swords at the same time. The sword tips didn't tremble at all as they tore through their chests and pierced through their backs. There wasn't a single stuffy cough, and even their bodies didn't tremble. They didn't seem like people, but more like wooden stakes. In the next moment, a crimson sword phantom appeared above the heads of the 100,000 armored soldiers. In the blink of an eye, it condensed into a blood-red sword filled with monstrous killing intent that cut towards the blood dragon. Puff! The flesh and blood on the blood dragon's back was easily torn apart. Large tracts of scales fell to the ground, and pain appeared in its eyes for the first time. Its invincible aura began to tremble. But immediately, the blood dragon opened its mouth and sucked in a deep breath. The 100,000 armored soldiers suddenly froze. Clattering sounds resounded through the world as the black armors fell to the ground. The bodies of the cultivators inside had already turned to dust. In a single breath, the 100,000 armored soldiers had been completely annihilated. Outside the alchemy room, the Southshine Nation's old ancestors' eyes flashed open. Thunder flashed within them, and the armored soldiers standing at the four corners simultaneously turned to ash. There wasn't the least bit of emotion on his old face. Even if 100,000 of his troops died, his mind still wouldn't be shaken. His eyes became increasingly bright. The Southshine Nation's old ancestor seemed to have found chance. He lifted a hand and pointed a finger into the void. In the skies above the square buildings, the blood dragon that had destroyed the 100,000 armored soldiers suddenly emitted a pained roar. Its giant body violently trembled before being torn apart by 100,000 sword lights. From the inside out, the blood dragon's giant body had turned into a sieve. If it were a true flesh and blood life form, then no matter how terrifying its strength was, this strike would have destroyed its mortal body. But the blood dragon wasn't real. It was an illusion formed from the world's killing tribulation. The holes on its body wriggled and rapidly faded away, but its aura inevitably weakened. This was the first time it had been wounded. The blood dragon roared. It hurtled towards the earth. Before it truly arrived, the terrifying aura it carried with it had already turned the square buildings into powder. Dust soared into the skies. In the blink of an eye, the ground was cleared away, leaving behind only the alchemy room and the good fortune tablet in the distance. The Southshine Nation's old ancestor looked up. He stepped forwards, and the wrinkles on his face rapidly vanished. With each step he took, he had the appearance of a man in his 30s. He lifted a hand and punched out. This circle was like a river of stars flowing backwards. It instantly pierced through space and fell between the blood dragon's eyebrows. In the moment of the collision, behind the South Shy Nation's old ancestor, there was a clear phantom. There were rivers, mountains, and rivers. This was the current territory map of the South Shy Nation. As the old ancestor, he was the true ruler of the entire nation. He had the qualifications to mobilize the destiny of the nation to support himself. This fist was not only the strike of a peak blue sea, but it also contained the strength of the nation's destiny. This was why it was able to strike out with such a terrifying attack. The blood dragon was shaken backwards. With the scale between its eyebrows as the center, there was a loud cracking sound that rapidly spread outwards. But at this time, the blood dragon's eyes locked onto the South Shy Nation's old ancestor. Within its cold and cruel eyes, the phantom of a net appeared. The South Shy Nation's old ancestor's complexion changed. As if he could feel a terrifying crisis looming over him, he retreated again and again. With every step he took, his figure would disappear and then reappear in the distance. But even though he continuously shifted, he couldn't avoid the invisible net between the heavens and earth. This was because this was the power of the rules that existed in every corner of the world. The reason he retreated was not to escape, but to buy time. The South Shy Nation's old ancestor took a deep breath. There was a helpless sigh in his eyes that finally turned into a cold and harsh one. He bit his fingertip and pointed between his eyebrows. A black seed appeared, beating like a heart as if it were alive. Then, this black seed began to vigorously beat. An inexplicable aura spread out from the South Shy Nation's old ancestor's body. Su Xiao was the commander of the royal palace's guard department. In the past, after he refined the revival good fortune pill, he was recognized by the South Shy Nation's royal family and had been placed in an important position ever since. 2 hours ago, he was ordered to go deep into the royal palace's dungeon to guard the condemned prisoners. Although he was puzzled, he didn't express any doubts. At this time, Su Xiao was sitting cross-legged in a dark cage. He had a dignified expression as he sensed the terrifying aura outside. His heart raced and his eyes widened. At this time, a black seed appeared between his eyebrows. An incomparably terrifying, plundering strength wildly erupted from it. Su Xiao had a peak divine soul cultivation, and he had hopes of reaching the blue sea in this life. Even so, he wasn't able to make a single sound. He fell to the ground, his body curled up. After several breaths of time, all that was left on the ground were the clothes on his body. He had completely vanished. At the same time, a phantom stepped out from the South Shy Nation's old ancestor's body. Although its appearance was blurry, it was clearly the Su Xiao who had died in the dungeon. Hashtag, 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 hashtag. Chapter 354. Without hesitation, the phantom broke into the invisible net between the heavens and earth. It emitted a shrill scream, and gray flames emitted from its body, burning it to ashes in a breath of time. The South Shy Nation old ancestor's eyes dimmed a bit, but he was still as calm and callous as before. Another phantom stepped out from his body and was buried in the gray flames. Phantom after phantom died, consuming the power of the rules. When the invisible net finally faded away, 16 phantoms stepped out from the old ancestor's body. His eyes were incomparably dim and his face was pale. Because their auras were connected, the deaths of these phantoms also had a certain amount of damage to him. The blood dragon stabilized its body. Its broken scales rapidly regenerated. Its icy cold eyes locked onto the old ancestor, and it suddenly roared out loud. Bang! The blood dragon's body exploded, turning into countless blood-red raindrops that fell down from the skies. Each raindrop contained a shrunken blood dragon phantom. The old ancestor's complexion changed. Every drop of blood rain contained the aura of the world's killing tribulation. Although it had weakened a great deal, it was still enough to kill any cultivator at the divine soul realm and below. He could resist it, but he would need to consume all of the seeds he had accumulated. Countless years of painstaking effort would be destroyed in a single day. Even if he survived today's world-killing tribulation, wouldn't that be meaningless? The old ancestor sighed. He avoided the blood rain and looked at the alchemy room, a helpless expression on his face. He really did want to save Ningqin. For this reason, he didn't hesitate to destroy the capital city's Great Array formation and send 100,000 elite soldiers to their deaths. But when it came to his life, he could only retreat. This was because he wanted to save Ningqin in order to survive. If he destroyed his own foundation in order to do so, that would be putting the cart before the horse. Thus, the old ancestor decisively retreated. No matter how unwilling he was, he didn't hesitate at all. If Ningqin died, he might still have hope. At the very least, he would be able to give it his all. But what a pity! As for his promise, the old ancestor didn't feel uneasy at all. He had already tried his best. The blood rain wasn't stopped. It fell onto the alchemy room. Once it fell, the corrosive and destructive strength contained within would be enough to turn the room and Ningqin into nothing. In the distance, the silent good fortune tablet suddenly erupted with a dark golden light. It was rich and blazing, as if blazing flames had covered the alchemy room. Drops of blood rain fell inside. They were wrapped in the dark golden light. Even though they possessed a terrifying might, they weren't able to destroy these drops. The shrunken blood dragon stared straight at the good fortune tablet. As more and more blood rain fell down, it fused into the dark golden light. Roar! The blood dragon appeared once more. It tumbled about, opening its jaws and claws to tear apart the dark golden light. In the distance, the good fortune tablet violently trembled. The Southshine Nation's old ancestor was stunned for a moment before his complexion paled. He never thought that the good fortune tablet would actually protect Ningqin. And like this, he had been forced into a hopeless situation with no room to retreat. Otherwise, if the good fortune tablet was damaged, he would also die. However, the good fortune tablet was so resolute in protecting Qinyu. As the old ancestor saw this, he couldn't help but think about it. It seemed that Ningqin was indeed incomparably important, perhaps even more important than he thought. Since that's the case, I'll give it my all. On the altar in the underground palace, the patriarch's main body suddenly opened his eyes. Then, a figure stepped out from between the two oil lamps in front of him. The two of them clasped their hands and bowed to the old ancestor before taking a step forward and vanishing from sight. In the next moment, the two figures appeared outside the pill room, forming a triangle with the ancestor's clone. Of course, these words weren't very clear because these three people were the old ancestor's avatars. 100,000 years had passed, and the old ancestor had lived for a long time, even surpassing the calamity immortal realm. Because of certain restrictions, the old ancestor hadn't been able to break into the calamity immortal realm. But after such a long period of time, even a pig could cultivate to a profound boundary, much less the old ancestor who controlled the Southshine Nation. It was true that he was a blue sea, but he was absolutely one of the strongest blue seas in the world. This was because each of the old ancestors' avatars were at the peak of the blue sea realm. 3 peak blue sea avatars with a super combat strength of 3,000 dragons attacked without reservation, punching out at the blood dragon. Dark golden light tumbled like a raging sea. 3 deep fist marks appeared on the surface of the blood dragon's giant body. Each fist mark spread out in a circle. Visible fluctuations swept out, and wherever they went, the scales would disintegrate. The blood dragon's eyes revealed pain. It opened its mouth and spat out a dragon breath, sending one of the old ancestors' avatars flying away. But the true terror of the dragon breath wasn't its explosive power. Rather, it was the old ancestor's avatar that was forced back. In fact, through the connection between the 2 avatars, this red color began to spread to the other 2 avatars. On the altar, the Southshine Nation's old ancestor's thin face revealed a look of anger. The flames of the oil lamp in front of him had turned red, and the 2 closest to him also began to turn blood red. With a pained expression, the old ancestor lifted a hand to extinguish the red oil lamp. Then, he lifted his hand again and again. A drop of blood fell from his fingertips into the oil lamp, temporarily dispersing the blood-red color. Just 2 drops of blood seemed to have hollowed out the old ancestor's body. He became even thinner, and wrinkles wove over his face, each one filled with the aura of decay. But the greatest loss was the extinguished oil lamp. His avatar had fallen into a deep slumber, and it was unknown just how much effort it would take to awaken him once more. Moreover, the old ancestor didn't know what sort of effect the blood-red color would have on his avatar. This unknown worry caused his complexion to become even uglier. But with things having come to this point, he could only grit his teeth and walk to the end. With a thought, 2 more avatars stepped out from the oil lamp. The old ancestor's breathing became heavy. Supporting 4 avatars to descend at the same time was a tremendous pressure on him. But at this time, the old ancestor clenched his teeth, and 2 more avatars appeared. In the underground palace, at the edge of the altar, the 4 peak blue sea avatars all had fluctuations in their eyes. The old ancestor stuffily coughed. Blood flowed out from his nose and mouth. He lifted a hand and pointed between his eyebrows. The black seed screeched out. The fluctuations in the eyes of the 4 blue sea avatars were directly erased. They bowed and then teleported away. Outside the dark golden light, the 6 peak blue sea avatars gathered together and fiercely attacked. The blood dragon howled. Even if it was the incarnation of world-killing tribulation and possessed the power to destroy the heavens and earth, under the suppression of the good fortune tablet, it still wasn't able to withstand the all-out attack of 6 peak blue sea avatars. Its massive body began to collapse inch by inch. The pupils of the 6 old ancestor avatars shrank. They turned and retreated without hesitation as a blood-red shockwave swept out in all directions. The good fortune tablet violently trembled. The dark golden light was torn to pieces. The 6 old ancestor avatars tumbled in the air as they were struck into the distance, their faces pale. On the altar, the old ancestor's true body violently gasped for breath. Sweat streamed down his entire body, but he still smiled. He had made it through. Just as this thought appeared in his mind, his eyes widened. A change occurred the moment the blood dragon self-detonated. As the blood-red shockwave erupted, a blood dragon phantom as thick as an arm broke into the alchemy room. No! The 6 old ancestor avatars roared out together. But he knew that it was already too late. Although the blood dragon was only as thick as an arm, it still contained the last wisp of its pure strength. It was more than enough to kill Ming-Qin. Even if he had the bracelet he had, it still wouldn't be enough to resist it. The good fortune pill was still swallowing his blood, essence, and lifespan. Qin Yu's pitch-black eyes were icy cold, without the least bit of emotion. Suddenly, he looked up. The blood dragon phantom shot out. As his icy cold eyes met, Qin Yu could clearly feel the thought it sent out. I've found you. Without any hesitation, the blood dragon brazenly rushed forwards. At the same time, a bone-chilling chill gushed out from the depths of his soul. His blood nearly froze, and his heart stopped beating. Qin Yu was unable to resist. He could only stare helplessly on as the blood dragon arrived. It sank into the point between his eyebrows and completely erased his soul and life force. At this moment of life and death, the black bracelet on his wrist erupted with light, blocking the blood dragon outside. But this block only lasted for an extremely short period of time. Perhaps it wasn't even a breath of time before it was broken. The black bracelet shattered into powder that fell to the ground. But in the blink of an eye, Qin Yu had time to react. He grabbed the blue tree branch in front of him and activated its protective strength without hesitation. The blood dragon crashed into the blue tree branch. It was clearly weakened, and the blue tree branch was far weaker than the black bracelet. Even so, it was still able to block it for a breath of time. In front of Qin Yu were the soul protecting treasures he obtained from the treasury, as well as the ancient divine sword. Unfortunately, the blood dragon's speed was far too fast, and he didn't have time to respond. It was like he had been struck in the head, and his brain was about to be torn apart. A terrifying pain swept through his entire body, but in the next moment, everything froze over. Within his soul space, the blood dragon circled around Qin Yu's immobile soul. Its icy cold eyes swept around, a trace of disappointment in them. But all of this happened so quickly that it seemed like an illusion. The blood dragon opened its mouth, and he could see a blood-red light condensing in it. Qin Yu was well aware that if he was struck by this blood-red light, his soul would surely perish. Even though he had prepared so much, he still couldn't escape death in the end. A bitter feeling rose in his heart that soon turned into unwillingness. Qin Yu was unwilling to die. He hadn't truly experienced the vastness of the land of divinity and demons. He hadn't stepped into the distant immortal sect. He hadn't found that girl. He had promised that the two of them would meet again. He couldn't die. He absolutely couldn't die. Perhaps it was because of his strong will to live, but Qin Yu's frozen soul actually managed to struggle free. Looking at the lowly soul that lifted its hand as if it wanted to resist, the blood dragon's eyes remained indifferent, without any fluctuations. Because all of this was meaningless. Then it was time to end this. Blood-red light gushed out. But at this time, another figure appeared without warning. Then, countless motes of starlight sprinkled down from the sky within his soul space. They were incomparably weak, and there were so many that it was impossible to count them all. In the blink of an eye, a thick layer of them fell onto the blood dragon's body. Spirity's face tightened. Her body shivered, as if she were withstanding a tremendous pressure. As Qin Yu's partner soul, for some reason, she had been silent this entire time, so silent that one would nearly forget her existence. But when the blood dragon invaded his soul space to destroy Qin Yu's soul, her silence was broken, and she erupted with her complete strength. Kacha! Kacha! The motes of starlight condensed, turning into a layer of ice that froze the blood dragon within. But this clearly wasn't able to harm it at all. This was because the frozen blood dragon's eyes fell on Spirity, its gaze still icy cold and indifferent. Bang! The layer of ice shattered and a blood-red light gushed out. The blood dragon didn't attack Spirity, because as a partner soul, when its master died, she would also vanish in a thin air. Chapter 355. Cultivators absorb the spiritual energy of heaven and earth to refine it into their own magic power. Using this magic power to unleash a large-scale killing technique was known as Dharma spells. When one stepped into the divine soul realm, they would open their soul space. Their soul would become clear, strengthening their soul, increasing their strength, and using the power of their soul to release their might. This was called a supernatural ability. Spells and divine abilities. For low-level cultivators, there wasn't much of a clear division. But differences were differences. They had always existed. It was just that you didn't have the qualifications to know about them. Of course, this wasn't nonsense, because spells and divine abilities were completely different, but in some very special cases, they were fused together. To explain it clearly, it could be activated with magic power. It is a spell. It could also unleash its soul, which was a divine ability. In the land of divinity and demons, any existence that was both a magic art and supernatural power had a completely new name, Tao laws. The Tao was the rule, and the Tao contained the power of the rule. It could be used by different forces because the rule was omnipresent and could not be tolerated. Even in the land of divinity and demons, where powerhouses were as common as clouds and where magic arts and supernatural powers were innumerable, Tao arts were extremely rare existences. Only large influences with truly deep backgrounds and long inheritances had a chance of grasping them. Qin Yu had nothing to do with these things, but sometimes his luck was really good. As the blood dragon stared at him, he discovered that he still had the strength to resist. The first of the blue fingers, boundless blue finger. As the finger fell, the eyes of Qin Yu's soul dimmed. A terrifying strength was drawn out, nearly tearing apart his soul. However, he gritted his teeth and persevered, keeping his consciousness clear. If he passed out now, he would definitely die. This was only a breath of time, but to Chinyu it felt like an eternity. The terrifying extraction finally stopped, and a crystalline finger collided with the blood-red light. Without the slightest fluctuation, the transparent finger and the blood-red light began to collapse at the same time. It seemed as if they had perished together, but countless cracks instantly appeared on the surface of Chinyu's soul. Every one of them was incomparably fine, like porcelain that had failed to be fired. It was as if the slightest touch would cause it to shatter on the ground. This was because the might of the blood light surpassed the limits of the boundless blue finger. Luckily, it wasn't too much. Otherwise, even if he shattered the blood light, his soul would have collapsed. The blood dragon stared at the cracked soul, and a trace of surprise flashed in its icy cold eyes. On the altar in the underground palace, the old ancestor's body was even more withered, like a corpse that had been dried out for many years. A rich death energy tumbled about him. Of the 9 oil lamps around him, besides one that had been extinguished, 6 of them trembled, drawing out blurry faces that roared as if they wanted to break free. The remaining 2 lamps also began to gently fluctuate, as if they were testing the waters. The old ancestor diabolically grinned. If I could refine you in the past, then I wouldn't have given you the chance to escape. He lifted his hand and slowly pointed down. With each finger, a drop of blood appeared. The 8 drops of blood each fused into an oil lamp. The light of the flames suddenly brightened, and one could faintly hear pained roars as they were burned. The faces drawn out by the flames vanished from sight, and the flames calmed down once more. But the old ancestor knew that this was only a temporary suppression. If he couldn't restore his vitality soon, he would suffer a backlash at any moment. The parts of the old ancestor's body that were exposed to the outside world had withered away like a dead tree branch. Countless cracks had appeared on the surface, and although they were small, they seemed to have pierced deep into his flesh and blood and even into his soul. Outside the alchemy room, the 5 old ancestor avatars were expressionless. Their calm eyes revealed a cold chill as they stared at the door. The old ancestor helped Chinyu walk out. He held a revival good fortune pill in his hand. Although the aura it emitted was weak, it was as dazzling as a great sun in the avatar's senses. The eyes of the 5 avatars revealed a struggling look. They took a step forwards, but this was all they could do. Blood-red shackles appeared from their flesh and blood, imprisoning them where they stood. They couldn't move at all. The old ancestor coldly sneered, but his voice was incomparably gentle. Ningqin, we will begin the sacrificial ritual. His tone was calm, but did not leave any room for objection. Chinyu swept his eyes over this scene. He forcefully endured the pain of his soul being torn apart and slowly nodded. Just this simple action caused sweat to pour down his body and his complexion to pale further. The old ancestor stopped 30 feet away from the good fortune tablet. He handed the revival good fortune pill to Chinyu and released his hand. A dark golden light wrapped around the tottering Chinyu and pulled him closer. Chinyu took a deep breath. He raised his hand with all his strength, and the revival good fortune pill was swept away by the dark golden light, vanishing into the good fortune tablet. After doing this, he could no longer resist the pain in his soul. Before his consciousness faded away, his last thought was, from this day forth, this stone tablet will finally be surnamed Qin. The old ancestor closed his eyes. He could feel the vitality that he hadn't felt for a long time rushing through his body. His body shivered, an intoxicated expression on his face. This was it. This was a fresh vitality, the strength to continue living on. Even though he had lived for 100,000 years, he was still filled with nostalgia towards this world. Now, he finally had another 100 years to live. 100 years was nothing more than a snap of a finger when compared to 100,000 years. But to the old ancestor who had already reached the end of his life, it was extremely precious. With these 100 years, he could carefully polish himself and make the best preparations possible. Then, he could break through the shackles that imprisoned him. calamity immortal. The old ancestor had never felt so close to it before. He opened his eyes and looked at the unconscious Chinyu. He revealed a gratified expression. He hadn't misjudged Chinyu. Saving him was the best decision. No matter how it was said, he had received a great favor from this junior today. Then, he might as well give him some good fortune. Moreover, everything he gave him today would be repaid in double in the future. The old ancestor smiled. With a thought, the good fortune tablet trembled. The 5 silent avatars outside the alchemy room all revealed pained expressions. Phantoms appeared on their faces, twisting and wailing. Faint wisps of pure soul force were extracted from their bodies. Then, with the dark golden light as a medium, they fused into Chinyu's body and were absorbed by his cracked soul. This soul force was the remnant souls that were unwilling to die. Before this, the old ancestor hadn't been able to erase them and could only forcefully suppress them. Today, since these departed souls had jumped out, he would take advantage of this chance to thoroughly cut them down once and for all. The mournful cries of the remnant souls became a feast for Chinyu's soul. He greedily swallowed and absorbed them. The cracks on the surface of his soul rapidly shrank and closed. Soon, Chinyu's soul was restored to its original state. Spirity's face flushed red. She could no longer suppress her impulses. She stretched out her arms, and the soul force crazily surged towards her. When these remnant souls were alive, each one had been incomparably powerful. Even the soul fragments that hadn't scattered to this day were incomparably pure because of their obsessions. The soul force they produced was far greater than imagined. Even if Chinyu's soul and Spirity tried their best, they still wouldn't be able to completely absorb them. And soul force couldn't be preserved. Once they couldn't absorb it, it would quickly dissipate and vanish from the world. Spirity's face flushed red with worry. But she had already risked her life and couldn't absorb any more soul force. She could only watch helplessly as the remnant souls tried to run away. She bit her lips so hard that she nearly broke them. If she were to cultivate this much pure soul force by herself, it would take at least dozens of years, or even longer. At this time, no one discovered that a line on the good fortune tablet suddenly lit up. Within Chinyu's soul space, a marvelous change suddenly occurred. The soul force that rushed in seemed to be pulled together. A round bead phantom appeared, rapidly condensing into reality. It was only the size of fist, but it was like a bottomless abyss. When the surging soul force fused into it, there was no response at all. Spirity's eyes widened. Soul bead, she trembled. She was Chinyu's partner soul and could sense everything he did. Understanding flashed in her eyes. She couldn't help but sigh inwardly. This master's luck was far too good. Spirity closed her eyes and fell into a deep sleep. Chapter 356. After being unconscious for 15 days, Chinyu finally opened his eyes. He was in a daze for a moment. As he looked at the soft light sprinkling through the window, he felt as if a lifetime had passed. After a dazed look, Chinyu didn't get up. He closed his eyes and sensed the state of his body. His soul felt unprecedentedly good. Not only had his terrifying injuries been completely healed, but he was even stronger than before. The most direct change was that his sensing ability had greatly increased. Spirity's eyes were closed as she slept. Her breath was calm and even. Although there weren't any changes, he felt as if something had changed within her. The fist-sized bead emitted a pale, yellow halo of light. Faint traces of pure soul force sprinkled down. As it approached his soul and Spirity, it was directly absorbed. Soul bead. Chinyu didn't know why he knew its name or even its abilities, but that wasn't important. What was important was that after today, the speed at which his soul strengthened would reach an astonishing degree before the soul bead dissipated. The Southshine Nation's old ancestor was quite generous. As Chinyu thought of the distorted faces that appeared on his avatars, he could roughly guess what was going on. Within his Dantian Sea, the 5 element nascent souls each emitted a radiant light. Their auras were incomparably condensed and filled the air with an invisible pressure. Each one was at the peak of nascent soul. After condensing pure magic power, their true combat strength surpassed 1,000 horses. Although he was still a nascent soul, Chinyu calculated that he could easily roll over most Divine Soul Realm cultivators. Moreover, he was just a step away from Divine Soul. Once he made a breakthrough, his combat strength would rapidly rise. It was too early to say that he could freely wander the land of divinity and demons, but as long as he was careful, it shouldn't be a problem for him to preserve his life. At that time, he could leave for the distant immortal sect. Chinyu opened his eyes and stood up. As he twisted his body, crackling sounds came from his joints. He stood at the bedside and looked through the window towards the distant horizon. After experiencing the world-killing tribulation and narrowly escaping death, he suddenly felt a sense of urgency. He wished he could immediately leave for the immortal sect, because he wasn't sure if he would have such luck next time. After a long time, Chinyu let out a long breath and suppressed his surging emotions. Soon, once he broke through to Divine Soul, he would immediately leave. An hour later, Chinyu had finished packing his things. After washing his face and changing his clothes, he sat down on the sofa and casually looked at the spirit screen. Everything was calm and tranquil, as if the terrifying scene that occurred half a month ago in the capital city had never occurred. It seemed that the South Shine Nation officials had invested a great deal of effort into this matter. Otherwise, it would have been impossible. There was a knock on the door. Qin Yu's eyes flashed. "Please enter." Qin Wushang pushed open the door and entered, his face full of smiles. "Ning Qin, how do you feel? If you feel uncomfortable anywhere, you must tell me." Qin Yu cupped his hands together. "Thank you, Chief Steward. I'm very well now." He paused for a moment and continued, "I've never been better." Qin Wushang's smile became increasingly brilliant. "You have improved the good fortune tablet condition and have performed a great merit for my South Shine Nation. The old ancestor will naturally reward you generously. By the way, the old ancestor asked me to tell you that the Deva Soul is no longer of use to you. You can keep it until you break through to the Divine Soul Realm. You'll naturally know its wondrous uses then." Qin Yu said, "Thank you for your reminder, old ancestor." Qin Wushang cut straight to the point. He earnestly said, "Ning Qin, the old ancestor appreciates you quite a bit. If you are willing, you can stay in the capital to cultivate. The treatment will surely satisfy you." This was recruitment. For someone of Qin Wushang's status to speak so bluntly, one could tell that his attitude was sincere. If it were any other cultivator, they would have been pleasantly surprised. With the recognition of the South Shine Nation's old ancestor, it would be difficult for their future achievements to be low. Qin Yu sneered inwardly. He revealed a hesitant expression and shook his head. "Thank you for old ancestor's good intentions, but I have some private matters to attend to, so I cannot stay in the capital city for too long." Qin Wushang nodded to show that he understood. Unexpectedly, he didn't try to persuade him any further, as if he really was just casually mentioning it. Qin Yu was slightly surprised. Then, he immediately understood. The old ancestor should have already guessed his choice and didn't force him to stay. Did he think that no matter where he went, he wouldn't be able to escape? Qin Yu's eyes drooped down, covering up the ridicule that flashed in them. It was still unknown who would be able to escape today. Qin Wushang didn't stay for long. He gave Qin Yu an official token and a storage ring before bidding his farewells and leaving. This token represented one's official status. Not to mention anything else, but if one encountered trouble in the South Shine Nation, they would be able to obtain help from the officials. Aside from the spirit stones and the storage ring, most of it was filled with pills that could nourish the soul and increase one's sensing ability. They could help him form a divine soul as soon as possible. After inspecting it, Qin Yu placed it in his storage ring. Looking at Qin Wushang's intentions, if he wanted to leave, he could leave now. But what about Ninth Province? This clearly extraordinary pill furnace seemed to have been forgotten. No one actually mentioned it. He shook his head and suppressed these thoughts. Since the South Shine Nation didn't mention it, Qin Yu was happy to play dumb. After all, no one would complain about having too many treasures. Then, he might as well leave. He stood up and pushed open the door. There was already a maid waiting outside. After Qin Yu said his goodbyes, she respectfully led the way. It was clear she had been reminded. The courtyard was quiet and luxurious. This wasn't the royal palace, but it wasn't an ordinary place either. Qin Yu followed behind the maid. He suddenly sensed something and turned to look into the distance. Hidden by the trees, he could see a small wooden building hidden within. The feeling of being watched disappeared. Qin Yu frowned. He looked away and continued forward, soon disappearing from sight. Zhao Jiutian's complexion paled. Revered Yuan, are we just going to watch helplessly as he leaves? Yuan Tiangang had no expression. This is the capital city. Zhao Jiutian revealed a happy expression. It seemed that revered Yuan had decided to make a move. Beneath the might of a blue sea, Ning Qin would undoubtedly die. It was just that he didn't discover that in Yuan Tiangong's deep eyes, there was a faint aura. From the fourth level of nascent soul, he had risen to the peak of nascent soul. His soul had become incomparably condensed, and he had reached the threshold of breaking through to divine soul. The good fortune tablet had actually given him such a formidable strength. In addition to the old ancestor's previous performance and the world-killing tribulation that descended half a month ago, Yuan Tiangang couldn't help but develop an interest in Qin Yu. It was just that the old ancestor had given him a warning and he had promised not to attack again. But once he left the capital city, he would have plenty of opportunities. At the underground altar, Qin Wushang respectfully knelt to the ground. Old ancestor, Ning Qin has already left the royal family courtyard. Between the 8 lamps, the old ancestor chuckled. As expected, this junior should have sent something. Qin Wushang revealed a worried expression. The old ancestor has invested a great deal in him. If an accident were to occur, the old ancestor smiled. Don't worry, there won't be any problems with this seed of mine. Qin Wushang knew that the old ancestor was prepared. He respectfully nodded and took several steps back before leaving. The old ancestor was silent for a moment. Then, a strange light appeared on his slightly plump face. Ning Qin, I have high expectations for you. I hope you don't disappoint me. As Qin Yu stepped out of the main entrance, he discovered that this was a royal family courtyard. No wonder it was built so luxuriously. The maid respectfully bowed and excused herself. Before leaving, there was curiosity in her eyes. She didn't know who this young man was and had only been ordered to wait there. So, why was he in such a hurry to leave? It had to be known that living in the royal family courtyard was in itself a symbol of status. Every year, countless people would do everything they could to squeeze in. Wait a moment. The maid hurriedly drew back to the side, making way for the young girl. Awe filled her eyes. She watched as the young girl ran to the side of that strange young man, her face filled with joy and intimacy. Her heart shook. The maid recognized this young master of the great desolate lake. It was only then that she realized that this common-looking young man was actually a truly great figure. The maid turned and hurried away, afraid that she would hear something she shouldn't know. Ning Qin, are you all right? White Fong Fong asked worriedly. Qin Yu smiled. I'm fine. White Fong Fong grabbed the hem of her clothes. When she heard that Qin Yu had left, she had hurriedly chased after him. But now, she didn't know what to say. Her face flushed red. Luckily, the sound of footsteps behind her helped her. White Fong Fong quickly turned around and coquettishly said, Uncle Ming, why are you so slow? Ming Siyuan bitterly smiled. For better or worse, he was still a blue sea cultivator. Did he really have to run over like her? Qin Yu cupped his hands together. Greetings, revered Ming. Ming Siyuan smiled. Ning Qin, there is no need to be so polite. During the time you were unconscious, my family's miss was extremely worried. She especially asked for some vitality-restoring pills from her family. Take them. As he spoke, he took out a jade box. Qin Yu waved his hand. It's too precious. Ming Siyuan's voice was calm. Compared to my family's miss, this isn't anything at all. Qin Yu looked at the expectant White Fong Fong and helplessly smiled. All right, thank you, revered Ming. Without even looking at it, he received the jade box and put it away. This temperament suited Ming Si-Yuan's taste. Ning Qin, where are you going? White Fengfeng's ears perked up. Qin Yu said, this junior has already asked Chief Steward Qin for his resignation. I am preparing to leave the capital city today. Ah, you're leaving? White Fengfeng anxiously asked. Qin Yu nodded. I need to go into seclusion for some time. Ming Si-Yuan's eyes flashed. He pulled back White Fengfeng, who wanted to say something. Then, I wish you luck in advancing to Divine Soul as soon as possible. With his eyesight, he could naturally see that Qin Yu was on the verge of a breakthrough. Qin Yu cupped his hands together. Then, this junior bids his farewells. Ming Si-Yuan suddenly said, Ning Qin, the road ahead is long. You must be careful. Thank you for the reminder, revered Ming. This junior will remember this. Qin Yu turned and left, soon vanishing from sight. White Fengfeng cried out, Uncle Ming, how could you let him leave? Didn't you say that you would invite him to join the great desolate lake? Ming Si-Yuan shook his head. Young master, if he chooses to leave, that means he has rejected the South Shine Nation. Do you think the great desolate lake will be more attractive to him? White Fengfeng was stunned. She was only confused about certain matters, but she immediately understood that with her big brother Baoyu's reincarnated Deva body, there were likely many secrets he didn't want others to know about. But she still wasn't willing. Uncle Ming, you said that he would be in danger if he left the capital city. A sharp light flashed in Ming Si-Yuan's eyes. I've already warned him, and Ning Qin has remained calm. It seems he has already responded. Don't worry, little friend Ning Qin will be fine. On the contrary, if someone really tries to attack him, he will surely suffer misfortune. Qin Yu left the royal courtyard. Moments later, he stepped into a transmission array. Then, he went through several more transmission arrays. When he finally stepped out of the transmission array, a black robe covered his body. Without stopping, Qin Yu hurried towards the city gates. Under the indifferent eyes of the city guards, he left the capital city through a side gate that led to the southeast. After walking for a while more, he left the no-fly zone. Shua, with a flash of light, Qin Yu shot into the skies, rapidly flying far away. Chapter 357. Qin Yu roared out loud, and boundless magic power erupted. But as his strength crashed into the void, it was cleanly offset by the ripples. A suppressive strength gathered from all directions, suppressing him so that he couldn't move at all. Another black-robed figure walked out from nothingness. He was tall and strong. Do not resist, and you will suffer less pain. You cannot escape from my hands. Qin Yu asked, Who are you? The black-robed figure's eyebrows arched up. Junior, you don't seem worried. Qin Yu was silent for a moment. Then he said, What a pity. The black-robed figure stiffened and a trace of unease surged in his heart. He decided not to delay any further. With a thought, a wave rose up from the ripples in space. But this wave wasn't able to fall onto Qin Yu's body. It was caught by an old hand and crushed to pieces. Then, with a swipe of the hand, the ripples in space collapsed and dissipated. The black-robed figure cried out, South Shine Nation's old ancestor. His body exploded and black fog flooded the world. At the same time, 21 figures fled in all directions. The old ancestor had no expression. It has been many years since someone has dared to cause trouble near the capital. He lifted a hand and grasped out. The world seemed to contract as if it were grasped in his palm. Everything within a circumference of 50 kilometers suddenly trembled. All of the ancient trees, forests, streams, everything within this area was turned into fine powder, erased from this world. The 21 figures collapsed at the same time. The black-robed figure staggered out. Old ancestor, please forgive me, I am... Puff, his head exploded. Red and white matter flew out, and even his soul was erased. The old ancestor lightly said, I am not curious about your identity. He flicked his sleeves, and the black fog that filled the skies vanished, as if it had never appeared. He turned to look at Ning Qin. Ning Qin, you seem certain that I will come to save you. Qin Yu pulled down his black robe. "Greetings, old ancestor." He didn't reply, but his calm expression itself was the best answer. The old ancestor faintly smiled. "It looks like you really do know." Chin cupped his hands together. "This junior doesn't know anything. I only wish to live a peaceful life." The old ancestor narrowed his eyes. "Aren't you afraid that I will make you stay behind?" Chin said, "If you wanted to make me stay behind, the old ancestor wouldn't have waited until now." The old ancestor laughed. "Ning Chin, I'm increasingly interested in you. What a pity that you aren't willing to stay behind." He changed the topic and looked at the headless corpse. "You borrowed this old man's hand to kill. Are you satisfied with the result?" Chin said, "The effect has been achieved. Unfortunately, it isn't the person this junior wants to wait for." "Who are you waiting for?" "Cleansing Temple, revered Yuan." The old ancestor's smile widened. He lifted a finger and said, "Yuan Tiangang. Ning Qin was actually waiting for you." Space twisted and Yuan Tiangong's figure appeared. His blue face squeezed out a smile. "Old ancestor must be joking. I would never have any thoughts of harming Ning Qin." The old ancestor's smile didn't diminish. "Is that so?" Yuan Tiangang hurriedly said, "Of course." The old ancestor restrained his smile. His eyes were faint. "But I don't trust you. In the future, wherever Ning Qin is, you must retreat 1,000 miles." Just how overbearing were these words to directly expel a revered blue sea supermaster? But with the old ancestor's status and strength, he had the qualifications to do so. Yuan Tiangang cupped his hands. "Yes." He took a few steps back, turned around, and teleported away. "Are you disappointed that I didn't kill him? This junior doesn't dare." The old ancestor was silent for a moment. Then an icy coldness flowed in his eyes. "Ning Qin, perhaps you know something, but do not try to use it as something to rely on. Otherwise, you will not like the consequences." Without waiting for a response, the old ancestor stepped forwards and vanished from sight. Several breaths of time later, Qin Yu straightened himself, a cold smile on his face. "Old ancestor, you relied on the good fortune tablet to survive until today. For 100,000 years, you have become one with it. The good fortune tablet is now surnamed Qin, so what will you do? I wonder what sort of expression you will have the next time we meet. I'm really looking forward to it." 3 revival good fortune pills filled with blood finally completed the process of recognizing a master. However, the good fortune tablet was unusual, and the process of recognizing a master was extremely slow. It would take at least several years before one could thoroughly control it. The reason Qin Yu chose to leave was because he didn't want the South Shine Nation's old ancestor to discover this matter. After all, his cultivation was far too weak. Once he was discovered, his fate was uncertain. But as he thought about how he might be able to control the old ancestor in the future and influence the vast South Shine Nation, he couldn't help but smile as he looked at this corner of the world that seemed to have been erased. "Ani Hong, since you've come on out." With a loud crashing sound, over a dozen cultivators led by Ani Hong walked out from not too far away. Their complexions were deathly pale and panic-stricken. "Mr. Qin, did you deliberately leave the city to draw this person out?" Ani Hong looked at the headless corpse. As she thought about how, just a moment ago, he had been an incomparably powerful blue sea supermaster, her complexion became incomparably strange. Qin Yu didn't deny it. "If I borrow the old ancestor's hand to establish my might, I can save myself a great deal of trouble." Ani Hong's complexion was distressed. She thought that if a blue sea died like this, then the South Shine Nation's old ancestor would clearly protect him. Who would dare to provoke him? But soon, she couldn't help but bitterly smile. "Mr. Qin, do you know that we were there just now?" Looking at the direction she pointed, Qin Yu finally understood why this group of masters from the inn would be so panic-stricken. Ani Hong bitterly smiled. "We were just a few hundred feet away. We watched helplessly on as the world in front of us was instantly erased. I won't lie to Mr. Qin, but my legs are still shaking." Qin Yu couldn't help but laugh. "Why did you run over there? I think you should have been behind me." Ani Hong was too embarrassed to say that she was worried that Qin Yu wouldn't return, so she sped up to the front. She hesitated for a moment before answering. Luckily, Qin Yu didn't ask too much. Since there's nothing else, let's go. The inn was indeed prepared. They followed Ani Hong and the others to a small farm near the capital city. Here, spirit plants were grown, especially for the capital city. Looking at the signboard, Qin Yu actually had some impression of it. It was a popular high-end brand with low output. The group of people hurried in. The cultivators tending to the spirit plants in the farm didn't seem to notice them at all. All of them lowered their heads and continued with their original tasks. A simple transmission array was set up inside the farm. The group of 16 people stepped in and vanished in a flash of light. They appeared near the capital city, in a large citadel. Without any delay, the group stepped into the transmission array once more. After 3 transmissions, they appeared in a branch in a city within the South Shine Nation. When the South Shine Nation's old ancestor took action, he had indeed frightened away many people. Their journey was smooth. Ani Hong let out a clear sigh of relief. The 14 masters all had expressions of joy. They looked at Qin Yu with gratitude in their eyes. They never imagined that the one who took action would be a Blue Sea Realm superpowerhouse. If it weren't for Qin Yu borrowing the South Shine Nation's old ancestor's hand to establish his prestige, they feared they would have died long ago. The branch division had already made preparations to receive them. Qin Yu felt a bit tired after the repeated transmissions. After a short rest, he was barely able to restore his spirit. Ani Hong knocked on the door and entered. As her eyes fell on Qin Yu's long gray hair, awe filled her eyes. If the great desolate lake and cleansing temple could obtain news, then also had their own channels. They naturally knew where this gray hair came from. Moreover, after personally witnessing how much the South Shine Nation's old ancestor valued Qin Yu, Ani Hong's attitude became even more humble. Mr. Qin, the young master said that you can arrange your own itinerary. Where would you like to go next? Qin Yu thought for a moment. Back to the beast hunting battalion. Ani Hong was clearly surprised, but she didn't say anything. She nodded and went to make arrangements. Half a day later, only Ani Hong and Qin Yu stepped into the transmission array. After passing through a transfer point, they finally returned to the beast hunting battalion. Qin Yu had already taken off his mask. He stretched out his waist and took a deep breath, a light smile on his lips. The name of Ning Qin was far too dazzling in the South Shine Nation. It was time for him to disappear. In the beast hunting battalion, Qin Yu would complete the most important transformation of his cultivation so far. He would advance to the divine soul realm. From this day forth, a third of the inn's rear courtyard that outsiders weren't allowed to enter was divided out, becoming Qin Yu's personal training area. Ani Hong knew that Qin Yu would perceive the rules and break through to the divine soul realm. Thus, she issued strict orders to the women in the inn. They weren't allowed to casually approach him, and they weren't allowed to cause trouble. But the more she did this, the more these women understood just how important Qin Yu's current status was. Although they didn't know what was happening, they were skilled at observing others' expressions. Thus, when Qin Yu pushed open the window in the early morning, he could see beautiful women playing across the pond, each one gorgeously dressed. And most importantly, each of them wore less than the last, their private parts faintly discernible. Afterwards, this became increasingly serious, and the pond became the favorite place for women to stroll. A gentle breeze carried a delicate fragrance over. But with so many people around, the fragrance was inevitably too strong. Qin Yu sneezed for several days straight. Seeing that things were becoming increasingly outrageous, Ani Hong heavily punished several radical women who nearly ran around naked. Only then did this seduction show unwillingly come to an end. Qin Yu rubbed his nose and bitterly smiled. He didn't look down on these women. After all, they only hoped to find a powerful backer. There was nothing wrong with this. The seduction ended. But as the inn's most valued alchemist, he certainly needed someone to serve him. Even if he didn't need one, he still needed one. Thus, a young maid named Song Song with a towering chest was sent here with a transfer order. She became the only woman allowed to enter the vicinity of the pond, or perhaps calling her a girl would be more appropriate. Song Song came here on the orders of the young miss. Although the young miss didn't say it clearly, the assistant aunt had given her clear instructions. She was not allowed to approach Mr. Chin. The young maid dutifully performed her duty. She puffed up her bun-like cheeks and closely observed the situation. But these women were far too wanton. They actually dared to say such shameless words. If the young miss took a liking to Mr. Chin and married him in the future, she would also be a dowry. She might as well help the young miss test Mr. Chin's combat strength ahead of time. Bah, what a shameless woman, the young maid hatefully thought. Even if the young miss really did marry him, she absolutely wouldn't allow her to climb onto the young master's bed before the young miss did. This was the rule of the family. But soon after, she discovered that she was thinking too far into the future. Her face flushed red. She suppressed these thoughts and rushed into the courtyard. She pushed open the door a bit too much. A black shadow flashed backwards, and Song Song cried out in fright. Chin Yu helplessly said, "If anyone is afraid, it should be me. Just now, you nearly slammed my nose into the door." Song Song was at a loss. Her hands clutched at the hem of her clothes. Her face so red it seemed as if it would drip blood. Chin Yu found this a bit strange. He liked to tease the young maid, but looking at her today, she seemed a bit too shy. He shook his head, not thinking too much about it. "All right, I'm going out for a stroll today. You don't need to follow me." When Chin Yu walked far away, Song Song let out a long breath of relief. She patted her chest, her face filled with joy. Luckily, he hadn't seen through her, otherwise she would have died of shame. But with the current situation of the young miss and second miss, if they were to marry, what would they do? Chapter 358. After leaving the inn, Chin Yu walked down the street. The beast hunting battalion was very large with many people. It could be considered a small town. Thus, there were places of entertainment such as inns and other business units. As long as one had enough spirit stones or points, they could find any form of entertainment. Without any goal in mind, Chin Yu was just casually walking around. It had already been half a month since he had returned to the beast hunting battalion. Every day, he would attempt to break through the bottleneck and step into Divine Soul. His magic power foundation was solid and deep. His soul space had opened ahead of time, and his soul force was tyrannical. Chin Yu had faintly obtained some harvests, but it was like looking at flowers through a fog, always blurry and indistinct. The more anxious he was, the more difficult it was to grasp. He simply interrupted his cultivation and came out to relax his mind. When it came to cultivation, haste made waste. Sometimes Chin Yu would think that he still had a Davisol in his right hand. If he really couldn't do it, he could just swallow it and take a nap. But after reaching this step, it would be a waste to use a Davisol to make a breakthrough. Moreover, he faintly felt that perceiving the rules of the world on his own would be better. A place with many people couldn't be considered quiet. Chin Yu came out to relax and naturally didn't want to be too noisy. As he turned to a corner of the battalion, he saw several young cultivators walking towards him. Chin Yu frowned and turned to leave. There was a sneer behind him. "Chin Yu, you and I can be considered old acquaintances. How could you just leave after meeting?" The sound of footsteps quickened. Several people blocked his path. Wang Yuanan's lips curled up in an icy smile. He hadn't forgotten the enmity of the fire Kirin. Chin Yu frowned. "Move aside." Before Wang Yunan spoke, a young cultivator beside him gloomily said, "Brat, I find your face displeasing to the eye. I really want to smash it to pieces." The others remained silent. Their unkind gazes were more than enough to express their attitude. There are many people on the street. The conflict that occurred here attracted a great deal of attention. That person is Captain Yang's brother-in-law. That one seems to be Steward Wu's son. Look carefully. The one in the middle is the main character. I've seen him before. He's Lord Yuan, Jingzha's nephew. Everyone began to speak. Even though the beast hunting battalion was filled with fearless thorns, they still couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air, pity in their eyes. These youths weren't considered much by themselves, but when their backgrounds were added together, They were a formidable strength that no one wanted to provoke. An early-stage nascent soul, Brat had a conflict with them. How could he end up well? The surrounding discussions and respectful gazes made the few youngsters raise their chins, and they became even more arrogant. One of them said indifferently, "Brat, I don't know how you offended Brother Wong. Kneel down and kowtow 10 times, then prepare a table of wine to apologize. I'll give you a chance to reconcile." 10 kowtows. Isn't that too little? Steward Wu's son asked loudly. The young men burst into laughter. Wang Yuanan's status was the highest. He didn't say anything, but his eyes were filled with arrogance. Qin Yu's expression was calm. It wasn't that he was suppressing his anger, but that there really wasn't a single ripple in his heart. After experiencing the great competition and the events of the capital city, he had come into contact with the South Shine Nation's old ancestor, a great figure that soared above the highest heavens. Now that he saw these insolent youths, he simply couldn't find any interest in them. Without saying a word, he turned around and left. The laughter behind them stopped abruptly, as if they had been slapped in the face. The atmosphere was filled with awkwardness. The surrounding cultivators' hearts skipped a beat as they thought to themselves that this kid was quite daring. "Stop right there." Steward Wu's son's face flushed red. He reached out a hand, making piercing sounds. He wasn't weak at all. Qin Yu didn't turn around. He only stopped and lightly said, "This is the Beast Hunting Battalion." A second before he could grab Ning Qin, his palm was blocked. Wang Yuanan's complexion darkened. "Brother Wu, don't be impatient. There will be plenty of chances in the future." Within the battalion, besides a few places, no one was allowed to fight. Otherwise, they would be severely punished. The Lord Commander had always severely punished people for this. Even though they had extraordinary statuses, they still didn't dare to offend him. Everyone could hear the deep meaning behind these words. But Qin Yu lifted his foot and walked away, not pausing at all. There was silence. Everyone could clearly hear another loud slap in the face. Wang Yuanan's complexion became increasingly gloomy. "Let's go." The group of young masters of the Beast Hunting Battalion had ill intentions. The crowd quickly retreated, not wanting to provoke trouble. Faintly, they heard Steward Wu's son say, "Brother Wang, don't worry. My father is in charge of logistics. This brat will definitely cry." That's right. Brother Wang's cultivation has made successive breakthroughs in such a short period of time. Once you reach Divine Soul, this brat will be at your mercy. Don't let him ruin your mood. I'll set up a feast at the inn. Brothers, have a good time and enjoy yourselves. The young masters gradually moved further away. The cultivators that weren't interested in watching the fun dispersed. As they listened to the sounds of their voices, they once again observed a moment of silence for that brat who had just slapped his face. After being targeted by them, he feared his future days would be difficult. Perhaps he would even lose his little life one day. Qin Yu didn't care about what happened just now. He stood at the edge of the Beast Hunting Battalion and looked out through the invisible barrier. The endless sea of clouds was filled with howling heavenly winds. Occasionally, terrifying winds would crash into the barrier, stirring up ripples. Although these ripples seemed ordinary, if a cultivator below Divine Soul were to fall into them, their fate would be absolutely miserable. Qin Yu calmly looked on. He seemed to hear the howling of heavenly winds in his ears. These were sharp and mournful syllables, but as they fell into Qin Yu's ears, they seemed to carry with them an unknown rhythm. His pupils dilated, and he fell into an absent-minded state. After what seemed like a moment of absent-mindedness, Qin Yu's eyes regained focus. It was pitch black outside the barrier, and the howling of heavenly winds filled the darkness. His mind was still blurry, but the thick fog had lightened by a great deal. Qin Yu smiled. It seemed he wasn't too far away from making a breakthrough. Coming out today had been the right decision. But this good mood was ruined when he returned to the inn. The women's shouts and giggles were mixed in with the suppressed whispers of several youths. It seemed that the youths had paid a sufficient price to bring a woman out for the night. This was an extremely normal occurrence in the inn. But when both sides met in the hall, the atmosphere instantly turned heavy. Half drunk, Wu Naian was buried in a woman's chest. When he looked up and saw the figure at the entrance, his eyes widened. "Fuck, it's you, Brad." Wang Yuanan was overjoyed. He sighed inwardly. He had actually dared to come here. There were only a few places in the beast hunting battalion where one could fight, and that included the inn. It was normal for men to be jealous. As long as they didn't kill anyone, the most they would have to pay was a small fine. Wu Naian pushed away the woman in his arms and staggered in front of Qinyu. "You bastard! You dare to compete with me for a woman? You are courting death." He slapped him across the face. Wang Yuanan smiled. Although this surname Wu was crude, his mind was quite good. Although this excuse was bad, it was more than enough to beat someone up. The eyes of the surrounding drunken youths flashed. As they glanced at Wang Yuanan's expression, they cursed inwardly. If this surname Wu took the first step and left a favorable impression on Wang Yuanan, then even if they taught this brat a lesson today, the greatest merit would be his. As they were unwilling, they heard a dull bang. It was so deep and heavy that it made their scalps tingle. Several youths looked up to see Wang Naian fly back at an even faster speed. He smashed through the wooden floor of the inn, causing wood to stab into his face. He clutched his stomach and wildly vomited. Filthy blood mixed together. Just looking at it caused a chill to rise from their hearts. As they looked at the calm entrance, as if none of this had anything to do with him, they lost the courage to attack. Wang Yuanan had a dignified expression. After a moment of silence, he stepped forwards. "Qinyu, you injured my friend. You cannot leave today." Although everyone knew that today they were here to take revenge for the Fire Kirin's matter, it was still much better to put on the mantle of standing up for a friend. Qinyu didn't care about his thoughts at all. He frowned and said, "Don't provoke me." Wang Yuanan smiled. "I'm really curious. What qualifications do you have to remain so calm in front of us?" He shook his head. "Is it because of your late, nascent soul cultivation? But in my eyes, you are nothing at all." Bang! A powerful aura broke out from his body, instantly reaching the peak of nascent soul. Wang Yuanan lifted a hand and pressed forwards. Heaven and earth's spiritual strength gathered, condensing into a round seal. The bottom was carved in 4 directions, containing the potential of a round sky and square earth. Lord Yuan Jingzhi's secret technique. Several cries of alarm sounded out in the inn. Although no one appeared, it was clear that the conflict here was being noticed. Qinyu stepped forwards. The ground collapsed, and he didn't dodge at all. His body was like a mountain-splitting saber as he cut down at the round seal. There was a loud explosion, causing everyone's ears to ring. The round seal stiffened for a moment before directly collapsing and dissipating. Qinyu's figure didn't stop. He approached Wang Yuanan and lifted his leg. The air exploded with a crackling sound. Wang Yuanan's complexion changed. He crossed his arms in front of him and with a stuffy cough was sent flying away, crashing into a pillar in the hall. The pillar itself was intact, but the jade bottle behind it trembled and shattered. Puff! Wang Yuanan spat out a mouthful of blood. He staggered, his eyes wide with shock. When he first arrived at the beast hunting battalion, although Qinyu was strong, he was at most on par with him. But now, he had his uncle's help and obtained several treasures from the beast hunting battalion. His cultivation had risen by leaps and bounds, but he still wasn't Qinyu's match. There had to be some secret on Qinyu's body. His thoughts raced. Wang Yuanan roared out, "Qinyu, you dare to injure me. Men, take him down." Outside the inn, several cultivators from the armored army strode in. They frowned slightly upon hearing this, but they had no intention of refusing. The one leading them was a second lieutenant. His aura was at the peak of nascent soul, and his body tumbled with slaughter energy. It was far from what Wang Yuanan could compare with. He reached out a hand, but with a cry of surprise, his hand turned into a palm that collided with Qinyu's. Blood tumbled in his chest. Looking at Qinyu, who had only taken a single step back, and whose complexion hadn't changed at all, the second lieutenant's eyes brightened. He coldly said, "You dare to resist arrest?" Qinyu remained expressionless. "Why are you arresting me?" The second lieutenant didn't answer. He lifted a hand, and the cultivators behind him raised black crossbows. "Surrender yourself. Otherwise I will kill you without mercy." The arrowhead shined with a cold metallic sheen. In particular, the blue spots on the arrowhead left one shuddering. These were the poisoned arrows of the army. The shooting power was astonishing, and they could be fired in rapid succession. Moreover, they possessed defensive properties. Even if a divine soul cultivator were to be targeted by several crossbows, they still wouldn't dare to move. Wang Yuan'an's eyes flashed with joy. It seemed like he had recklessly mobilized his uncle's guards to capture Qinyu, but as long as he held Qinyu in his hands, he could pry open his mouth. Chapter 359. The second lieutenant waved his hand. "Take him down." He didn't believe that Qinyu would dare to resist. Sure enough, he furrowed his brows and relaxed his tense body. That frightening aura disappeared along with it. The second lieutenant relaxed a little, and his complexion darkened. He didn't think that he would actually feel fear towards this boy. He coldly humphed inwardly. The lieutenant had already decided that he would let Qinyu experience the cruelty of the autumn wind sweeping away the fallen leaves. But before the two guards could approach Qinyu, they were stopped by the red-dressed Ani Hong. She smiled, a gentle light in her eyes. "Second Lieutenant Du, why are you so angry that you want to capture someone from our inn?" The lieutenant's eyes revealed a trace of dread. "Ani Hong, it's not that I want to be insolent in the inn, but this person has injured my family's young nephew. I cannot let him off." Ani Hong's smile didn't diminish. "Second Lieutenant Du, can you really not bend the rules?" The lieutenant's complexion changed. He braced himself and said, "Ani Hong, please don't make things difficult for me." Auntie Hong lightly said, "Lord Yuan Jingzhe has a high status, and I have always admired him. But the cultivators of my inn will not allow themselves to be bullied and humiliated by others." The lieutenant clenched his teeth. "This person is a cultivator from the inn?" Ani Hong smiled. "I won't lie to Second Lieutenant Du. His words were polite, but the meaning behind his words was as if he was peeling off his face. You don't have the qualifications to make me lie. There's a surveillance camera at the entrance of the inn. We'll know what happened once we pull it out." The second lieutenant's face darkened. Although he was furious, he didn't dare to say anything. The power and background of the inn wasn't something a mere second lieutenant like him could provoke. Now that they were riding a tiger, it was hard for them to get off. If they were really scared off, their master's reputation would be tarnished, and they would be punished. Thinking that this was all because of Wang Yuanan, the second lieutenant's eyes were filled with resentment. Wang Yuanan cursed inwardly. He never thought that something like this would happen, but he didn't dare to do anything at this time. He took a deep breath and cupped his hands together. "Ani Hong." Before he finished speaking, he was interrupted. Auntie Hong lightly said, "From now on, Sir Wang's business is not to be accepted. What are you all standing around for? Go back and greet the guests." The woman who had promised to be taken away obediently lowered her head and turned to leave. Ani Hong turned. "Let's go." Qinyu rubbed his nose. He thought that this slap wasn't bad at all. He smiled and followed after her. Wang Yuanan's face turned red, purple, and then green. He spat out a mouthful of blood, closed his eyes, and collapsed. At a time like this, the only way to survive was to feign death. Second Lieutenant Du ordered his men to lift Wang Yuanan and left with a livid face. The rest of the youngsters looked at each other in dismay. Who would have thought that the drama of stepping on a bug would develop into such a situation? Din's background had always been mysterious, and they had long been warned not to provoke them. He grabbed Wu Nayan and followed behind the guards, leaving dejectedly. After entering the rear courtyard and avoiding the eyes of the outside world, Auntie Hong quickly turned and bowed. "Mr. Qin, in order to keep your identity a secret, I have offended you. Please forgive me." Qinyu waved his hand. "It's fine." His eyes flashed. "Auntie Hong has such a tough attitude today. Don't you fear that Lord Yuan Jingzhe will retaliate against you?" Auntie Hong smiled and said, "Then has always adhered to the principle of keeping a low profile. But if someone tries to bully us, we won't be afraid. What's more, Wang Yuanan was rude, sir. If I wasn't worried about arousing suspicion, I wouldn't have let them go. Qin Yu faintly smiled. Ani Hong, are you trying to show off the inn's muscles to win me over? Ani Hong revealed an awkward expression. I don't dare to deceive Mr. Lin. The orders I received were to satisfy Mr. Lin and increase your sense of identity with the inn. Qin Yu hesitated for a moment. He said, Ani Hong, I will be frank with you. After I break through to Divine Soul, I will be leaving. There is no need for the inn to place such a heavy bet on me. Ani Hong earnestly bowed. Mr. Qin, there is no need to worry. Young Master once said that if you were to refuse the South Shine Nation, then there must be a reason. Then doesn't hope that you can stay here. We only hope that we can become your friend. Young Master also said that as long as we can do this, it will be the inn's greatest harvest. Qin Yu was surprised, but he couldn't help but admit that these words did make him feel comfortable. Moreover, the inn's open and candid attitude was even better. He smiled and didn't say anything more. He turned around and left. Wang Yuanan's face was ashen. He leaned against the headboard and gnashed his teeth, looking as if he wanted to tear his own flesh apart. What did Uncle say about this? Young Master, old Uncle wants you to be patient for now. The inn's strength is great, and you cannot provoke them lightly. Scram, all of you scram for me. Wang Yuanan hurriedly kicked everyone out. He was panting for breath, and his face paled even further. But his eyes were calm, completely at odds with his current mood. That's right, this classmate Wang was putting on an act. He had to let others know that he hated Qin Yu to the extreme. Only then would he have an excuse to move against him. Wang Yuanan had an intuition that Qin Yu was hiding some great secret on his body. This intuition was incomparably strong. The next day, after Wang Yuanan had slightly recovered from his injuries, he ordered someone to quietly find a cultivator from his uncle's army. Uncle Su, this nephew has a matter that I hope you can help me with. The cultivator surnamed Su cupped his hands together. Young nephew's words are too serious. I don't dare. If you have any instructions, please feel free to speak. Wang Yuanan lowered his voice, a look of hatred on his face. Uncle Su, you should know that I lost face yesterday, and I cannot swallow this. I hope that Uncle can make things easier for me. The cultivator surnamed Su revealed an awkward expression. Wang Yuanan clenched his teeth. I heard that Uncle Su's knees were injured in the past, and you will feel sore on rainy days. I have a bottle of beast marrow fluid that might be of some use. The cultivator surnamed Su's eyes brightened. Young nephew, it's not that I don't want to help, but there is nothing I can do. Wang Yuanan earnestly said, Of course Uncle Su can. I have already investigated and found that Qin Yu hasn't completed his hunting missions for the past several months. I will think of a way for him to enter the wilderness. Uncle Su, you only need to tell me his transmission coordinates. I remember that the transmission array has always been under Uncle Su's responsibility, so it shouldn't be difficult to accomplish this. The cultivator surnamed Su looked at the beast marrow fluid and nodded. Good. I will immediately inform young nephew once I receive the news. Wang Yuanan was overjoyed. He repeatedly thanked him and then ordered someone to send him away. He closed his eyes and sensed the state of his body. Then, schoolmate Wang sneered. After several more days, once his injuries were healed, that would be the time to make his move. Qin Yu, I'll let you be smug for a few more days. Wang Yuanan thought he had done everything appropriately, but he didn't know that after the cultivator surnamed Su left, he soon appeared in Yuan Jingzhe's office. He took out the beast marrow fluid and placed it on the table. Then, he stated everything he had agreed to without reservation. Yuan Jingzhe glanced at him. Brother Su, do you think I spoil Yuanan too much? The cultivator surnamed Su cupped his hands together. I don't dare. It's just that the inn is an extraordinary place. It wouldn't be wise for my lord to offend them. Yuan Jingzhe smiled. I understand what Brother Su is saying, but I have my own reasons. The cultivator surnamed Su's complexion changed. Yuan Jingzhe revealed a helpless smile. The inn has been in the limelight recently, and their influence has expanded too quickly. They have already touched upon the interests of many people. In the past, I borrowed their hands to climb to my current position, so I must repay them now. The cultivator surnamed Su said, I was negligent. Yuan Jingzhe stood up and stood in front of the window. He looked out through the glass. Brother Su, I fear that child Yuanan has taken a liking to the secrets of this junior Qinyu. For him to reach the peak of nascent soul in such a short period of time is indeed extraordinary. That child is likely worried that I will also see this and try to snatch away the fat meat in his mouth. But I'm not angry. In this world, only those with deeper thoughts can live longer. Yuanan has done well. It's just that even though he thinks he's smart, there are some things he might not be able to handle properly. I'll have to trouble Brother Su to help him in secret so that he doesn't stir up any trouble. The cultivator surnamed Su respectfully bowed. I will excuse myself. Take the beast marrow fluid away. The cultivator surnamed Su hesitated. Yuan Jingzhe smiled. Since Yuanan asked for your help, what he gave to you is naturally yours. For the next several days, Qinyu spent his time cultivating. As time passed, the fog in front of him became increasingly thin. It was like the thin membrane of an egg that could be pierced through with just a little bit of force. He only lacked a turning point to break into divine soul. Instead, Qinyu calmed down. He didn't deliberately pursue a breakthrough and patiently waited. Unfortunately, his peaceful life was soon shattered by the news that Ani Hong brought him. He had been punished by the beast hunting battalion. Within 3 days, he had to step into the wilderness and complete a hunting mission that had been abandoned for several months. Qinyu frowned. He looked over. Ani Hong shook her head. Mr. Qin, I have already investigated this matter. It was the Lord Commander who inadvertently thought of you, so he ordered people to pay attention to you. As a result, she bitterly smiled. We had already made arrangements, but this really was an accident. Qinyu said, since it was an accident, I can't blame you. Ani Hong took a deep breath. Mr. Qin, in the end you are a member of the beast hunting battalion. This punishment was personally ordered by the commander, so I fear it will be difficult for you to refuse. However, if Mr. Qin is unwilling, I can make some arrangements. Qinyu lightly said, there is no need. Since it is the commander's order, I will make a trip into the wilderness. With his current cultivation, as long as he was a little more cautious, completing the hunting mission would be easy. The next day, after making some preparations, Qinyu left through the inn's transmission array. He didn't need to assign a residence to a transmission array because he was being cautious. There was nothing wrong with being a little more careful. Schwa, in a stone room carved into the wall of a dried-up spring, the dazzling light and spatial fluctuations were completely concealed, not a single sound leaking out. After several breaths of time, Qinyu stepped out. After sensing that there weren't any problems, he flew out from the withered spring. At the same time, a beast-hunting battalion cultivator hurried into Wang Yuanan's residence. After a moment, he walked out with a somber expression, 4 of his trusted subordinates following behind him. The transmission light flashed, and Wang Yuanan and the others vanished from sight. The wilderness was still as barren as before. Thick, ancient trees covered the sky, making it seem dark and gloomy. Qinyu slowly walked forwards. Although he didn't seem fast, he often crossed 1,000 feet in just a few steps. His footsteps were silent. His divine sense was like a drizzle, constantly sweeping over every inch of his surroundings. Suddenly, Qinyu lifted his hand and grasped. The vine snake that shot towards him fell into his hand on its own initiative. The snake's body collapsed, and a faint smell of blood wafted out. Qinyu's figure flashed several times. Before the blood stained his body, he had already left this area. The wilderness was unfathomably deep. Terrifying monster beasts could exist anywhere. With his current strength, he was far from being able to disregard danger. It wasn't wrong to be a bit more careful. 2 hours later, Qinyu stopped. He looked at his points card and found that he had completed the punishment requirements. There was nothing to be proud of. With his current combat strength, completing this punishment was a matter of course. Without staying any longer, Qinyu turned and flew straight towards the transmission array. Chapter 360. Pa, pa, pa. Wang Yuanan clapped his hands. Qin Yu, I never thought you would be so vigilant. Before he finished speaking, he raised his hand, and something exploded in the air. A foul black gas covered Qin Yu. With a loud shout, for beams of saber light appeared, sealing off all angles. They were ruthless and brutal to the extreme. They didn't hold anything back. Even if they were severely wounded or even killed by the counterattack, they still wanted to cut down Qin Yu on the spot. With such ruthless methods, even a divine soul realm cultivator wouldn't be able to escape unscathed. Moreover, once a saber cut through flesh and blood, the poison on the saber would be fatal. Wang Yuanan shot up into the skies. A pitch-black spear appeared in his hands. The spear point glowed with a blood-red light, its demonic nature soaring to the heavens. Like this, even if Qin Yu had a method to escape, he would still have to face a fatal strike after using the 4 saber strikes. Bang! The 4 beams of saber light collapsed without warning. The 4 saber-wielding cultivators cried out pitifully as their bodies were instantly torn apart. Wang Yuanan was frightened, shock in his eyes. The foul black gas parted, and Qin Yu walked out without expression. His black robes didn't have a single wrinkle. Ah! With a loud shout, the black spear shot out, the spear point glowing with a blood-red light. With a single strike, Wang Yuanan turned and fled. To instantly kill 4 of his trusted subordinates, Qin Yu's strength far surpassed his expectations. Damn, how could he be so strong? A blue leather boot on his feet erupted with a rich halo of light. Wang Yuanan's speed was astonishing, leaving only afterimages behind him. Luckily, he was prepared. His uncle had given him the wind-treading technique. Even a divine soul cultivator might not be able to match him, so escaping shouldn't be a problem. But just as this thought appeared, Wang Yuanan's heart violently shrank, and fear surged through him. Stop! With a loud shout, a figure flew out, lifting a hand and pressing down. Wang Yuanan was overjoyed. Uncle Su! There was a loud explosion behind him, as if 2 giants had collided. Wang Yuanan was frightened and immediately fled. He thought that this bastard Qin Yu was actually strong enough to contend with the middle divine soul realm, Su Yonyan. He had to convince his uncle to kill him, otherwise he would become a great calamity. Suddenly, Wang Yuanan felt something was wrong. Why was it so cold? He looked down and saw a large, transparent hole in his chest. Something seemed to be missing inside. A sense of powerlessness welled up in his heart. Wang Yuanan's body plummeted to the ground, his heart roaring. My aptitude is top-notch and my skills are superb. I will definitely have great achievements in the future. How can I die here? Pa! There was now a pile of rotten meat in the wilderness. It wouldn't be long before it was devoured clean by the foraging monster beasts. Su Yonyan's face was ashen. You actually killed Wang Yuanan. The Lord had no descendants and treated this nephew as his own. With such a big mistake, he would definitely not be able to escape responsibility. Qin Yu lightly said, if he wants to kill me, he naturally needs to be prepared to be killed instead. Su Yonyan turned and left. He had to pass this news to the Lord. But at this moment, his expression changed drastically, and he turned around to block the attack. Bang! Amidst the loud noise, Su Yonyan was sent flying. He crashed into several ancient trees and spat out a mouthful of blood. Qin Yu, you dare to attack me. Qin Yu didn't speak. He stepped forwards and approached once more. Su Yonyan let out a low roar. Space rippled, and his figure disappeared. Instant transmission. Qin Yu frowned. The shadow beneath his feet fluctuated, and he stepped into the shadows of the ground, vanishing from sight. Su Yonyan staggered forwards. Light flashed around him, and he rapidly flew away at a low altitude. The wilderness was filled with countless dangers. He didn't dare to teleport too far away, but it should be enough to shake off Qin Yu. This boy was clearly only at the nascent soul realm, but his combat strength was actually so terrifying. Fear flashed in his eyes. Su Yonyan sped up, but at this time, his eyes widened in endless shock. Spatial ripples appeared once more. This was the second time he used instant transmission. But before he could vanish, a palm had already struck his chest. Bang! Like a great drum being struck, the dense blood vessels on the surface of Su Yunyan's eyes burst open. His body stiffened, and then he slumped to the ground. A palm-sized translucent soul flew out from the top of his head. But before it could escape, a vortex appeared in Qin Yu's shadow. No! With a desperate scream, the soul was pulled in, and its aura instantly vanished. Qin Yu frowned. He never thought that the summoned life form that fused into his soul would actually have the ability to extinguish souls. It had to be known that divine soul cultivators had many methods to survive. Besides instant transmission, escaping with their souls was also one of them. However, it was clear that it would be extremely difficult for Qin Yu's enemies to rely on their souls to survive in the future. He bent over Su Yunyan's body and searched it. Unfortunately, after visiting the South Shine Nation's treasury, Qin Yu had become extremely wealthy. Besides several large spirit stone cards, there wasn't anything else that caught his eye. He shadow-stepped back to Wang Yuanan's corpse and searched it as usual. Sure enough, this young master had given him a pleasant surprise. Disregarding the boots called Wind Step, there was also a stalk of God transforming grass. This spiritual object emitted an aura that could enhance the soul's ability to sense the rules. It could be placed at one side when cultivating. It was a long-lasting treasure. Presumably, this was a treasure that Lord Yuan Jingzhe had prepared for his nephew in order to help him break into divine soul as soon as possible. Qin Yu's eyes flashed. He returned to the dry spring, filled in spirit stones, and stepped into the transmission array. There was a flash of light, and he vanished from sight. Yuan Jingzhe sat in his study, his face dark and gloomy. The air was so oppressive that it was hard to breathe. A day passed, and Wang Yuanan hadn't returned. Even Su Yunyan, who had been secretly following him just in case, had gone missing. Something had happened. Yuan Jingzhe's heart ached, and his eyes turned red. But with his powerful will, he didn't change his sitting posture at all. After a long time, he took a deep breath and coldly said, "Go to the inn and see if Qin Yu has returned." A corner of the study twisted for a moment before returning to tranquility. A moment later, a respectful voice sounded out. "My lord, Qin Yu has returned." Yuan Jingzhe closed his eyes in meditation. He nodded, indicating that he understood. After an unknown period of time, he let out a breath and opened his eyes. He stood up and walked out. When he stepped out of the study, the large mahogany chair he sat on shattered without warning. Every piece fell to the ground without making a sound as they shattered into countless pieces of powder. Soon, Ani Hong sat in a soft sedan and arrived at the commander's territory. As if they already knew this, the guards inspected her and respectfully let her pass. For hours later, Ani Hong walked out from the door with an icy cold expression. She bent down and sat down in the sedan. She couldn't help but rub her eyebrows, a look of weariness on her face. Luckily, Mr. Qin had returned and informed her of what had happened. If she hadn't been prepared, it would have been difficult to deal with Yuan Jingzhe today. It seemed that the rumors were likely true. Wang Yuanan was the incestuous son of him and his little sister. Otherwise, why would he place such importance on him? After returning to the inn, Ani Hong knocked on the door to Qin Yu's courtyard. After taking a seat, she respectfully said, "Mr. Qin, the matter has been handled." With the commander suppressing it, Yuan Jingzhe won't dare to casually attack. But to ensure your safety, it is best if you don't go out for the next period of time. Qin Yu nodded. "I understand. I'll have to trouble Ani Hong." Ani Hong repeatedly said that she wouldn't dare. She bowed and bid her farewells once more. Qin Yu sent her out and returned to the quiet room. The young maid was boiling water for tea. She wanted to say something, but hesitated. "Mr. Qin, I heard the miss say that Yuan Jingzhe is a patient person and his methods are ruthless. He isn't someone to be provoked." Qin Yu smiled. "He's already been killed, so it's useless to say such things." The young maid puffed up her cheeks. She asked, "Why couldn't you bear it for a bit?" Qin Yu shook his head. "You don't understand. At other times, in order to avoid trouble, I might have let him live. But now is not the time. He was about to make a breakthrough to divine soul. What he needed to do was relax his mind. If Wang Yuanan wanted to kill him, then he could only be killed. As for Yuan Jingzhe, he had heard that this lord's strength and methods were truly high. But Qin Yu wasn't worried at all. Not to mention that his current combat strength was already enough to roll over most divine souls. And once he made his breakthrough, there was no need to even mention it. So, Wang Yuanan killed him. The young maid wanted to say something else, but seeing Qin Yu's indifferent expression, she curled her lips and lowered her head to boil water. She thought that if there really was trouble, then she wanted to see just how arrogant he would be. In the wilderness, a group of people was rapidly advancing. Although they seemed a bit panicked, their movements were still orderly and orderly. Dozens of black-robed guards emitted a thick military aura. The one leading them was a tall and sturdy man. His chest had been severely wounded, but his face was like stone, without the least bit of pain. An invisible infernal energy was emitted from the guards' bodies, gathering together. It caused the monster beasts in the wilderness to flee, not daring to approach. But at this time, the sky was dark. Behind them, shadows flickered in the wilderness, as if there were countless evil spirits following them from far behind. After another hour, the leader lifted his hand, and the group came to a stop. Without needing any orders, the guards automatically spread out, forming a simple defensive formation. The leader walked to the only speed car in the group. He cupped his hands together and bowed. "Noble one, we have suffered great losses. We must stop and rest for a while." The window rolled down a bit, and a gentlewoman's voice sounded out. "I do not understand these matters. Captain Stone, you could decide for yourself." She paused for a moment and then continued. "All the way here, it was all thanks to Captain Stone's protection. Once we return home, I will definitely repay you." Captain Stone respectfully said, "This is my duty. Noble one is too serious." He turned and left. The group immediately reorganized. Dozens of guards rested in batches, tending to their wounds. The air was thick with the smell of blood. Captain Stone allowed his subordinates to help him clean up his wounds. His chest was torn open and the edges were blue and purple, making him look extremely fierce. But from start to finish, his complexion didn't change at all, as if this wound didn't exist on his body at all. Suddenly, Captain Stone pushed aside a subordinate in front of him. An arrow burst out and was caught an inch from between his eyebrows. The arrowhead trembled and buzzed. Enemy attack. With a loud shout, Captain Stone rushed out first. Miserable screams filled the dark wilderness, accompanied by the sound of flesh and blood being torn apart. The guards reacted quickly. They formed a circle around the speed car, protecting it. But at this time, the ground suddenly exploded. The terrifying impact sent the speed car flying away, and the guards were either killed or wounded. "Kill!" With a loud shout, a massive number of black-faced cultivators rushed forwards. Whenever they encountered an injured guard, they would finish them off. "Protect the noble one." The guards that could still fight jumped up and began to fight with the enemy. There was a terrifying explosion in the darkness. Several ancient trees were uprooted, and Captain Stone was sent flying backwards. The wound on his chest had split open, and his face was pale. But his opponent was in an even worse state. He spat out several mouthfuls of blood and slumped to the ground. "Pa!" Captain Stone fell beside the speed car. It had clearly been specially reinforced. Even though it had been sent tumbling to the ground by the explosion, there were only a few more cracks in the glass. "Noble one, the enemy is too strong. I will help you kill our way out." The door was pushed open from the inside, but was blocked by the dirt. Captain Stone grabbed the door and pulled, causing the two women to tumble together. Captain Stone hurriedly said, "Noble one, please forgive me." The green-clothed maid hugged the woman in her arms. "Noble one is injured. Hurry and save her." Chapter 361. Captain Stone's complexion changed. He grabbed the unconscious woman's wrist and then let go. "I've offended you. The noble one's condition isn't too good. She must be treated immediately. Let's leave here first. You support the noble one and follow behind me." Picking up a long sword, Captain Stone strode forwards. His wrist waved, sword energy crisscrossing as he cut out a bloody path. The remaining guards saw through their leader's intentions. They roared out loud, disregarding their own deaths as they entangled their opponents. Captain Stone strode forwards. The maid supported the noble one as she staggered behind. The sounds of fighting gradually faded away and the skies turned dark. The wilderness is too dangerous at night. The noble one also needs treatment. Let's stop here. Several sword strikes cut apart the thorns blocking the way. Captain Stone entered the cave first and soon came back out. It's safe. Help the noble one in. He stayed outside and erased the traces of the sword strikes. Then, he laid down an aura isolating array disc and turned to enter the cave. The maid took out a night pearl and skillfully placed it in a groove in the cave. The darkness was immediately expelled. Captain Stone, hurry and save the noble one. Her face paled and her voice trembled with fear. Captain Stone nodded. He half knelt beside the noble one and grabbed her hand. Miss, I need some clean water to wash myself. Hurry and prepare it. Okay. The maid flipped her hand and took out a blue jade basin as well as a large bucket of sealed spring water. She tore open the seal and poured the water into the basin. Puff! There was a dull thud, grating to the ears in the sealed cave. The maid's hand shook and the spring water fell to the ground. Her eyes widened in panic. She watched as Captain Stone slowly pulled out a blood-stained sword, her body shaking. Captain Stone turned, his expression still cold and callous. You're a loyal servant. Follow the noble one to the Yellow Springs and continue to serve her. As he spoke, he stepped forwards and thrust out his sword. But at this time, a strange expression appeared on Captain Stone's face. He stared at the maid for a long time and slowly said, It's you? The maid's complexion was still pale, but the fear in her eyes had disappeared. She revealed a look of disgust. You don't have the qualifications to kill me. Captain Stone furrowed his eyebrows. He slowly stepped forwards and then forwards again. The maid had already retreated to the edge of the cave. The two were less than a meter apart. However, this 1 meter was an insurmountable gap. His tall and sturdy body fell on his back and landed heavily on the ground. Black blood gushed out from the 7 orifices of the host's mouth and nose. Countless tiny creatures could be seen struggling in the black blood. Soon, they lost their vitality as their host died. The maid picked up the long sword and cut off his head. Her face became even paler, and her body began to tremble again. She looked to be only 15 or 16 years old, and there was an irrepressible fear in her childish eyes. If she hadn't changed her clothes and fed the poisonous goblet in advance, she would have been dead by now. Captain Schur was actually one of their people. The maid's body trembled even more violently. Fear washed over her like a tide, almost drowning her mind. After a long time, she took a deep breath and forced herself to calm down. Her eyes flashed quickly. Looking at it now, she had no other choice. She could only wait here and see if there was a turning point. Otherwise, even if she killed Leader Schur, with her cultivation, she wouldn't be able to leave this wilderness. After putting away the luminous pearl, the cave fell into darkness. The maidservant hugged her legs and leaned against the cold stone wall. She forced herself not to think about the 2 corpses beside her. After an unknown amount of time, she finally managed to fall asleep. A faint sound woke the maid up. She instantly stood up, her complexion pale once more. Lord Schur, are you and the noble one inside? The maid's eyes brightened. She quickly walked forwards and placed something on the 2 corpses. Then, she turned and walked out of the cave. It was already bright outside. The 20-some guards were all injured. As they saw the maid, their eyes brightened. They hurriedly asked, How are the leader and the noble one? The maid swept her eyes around. She turned her hand and took out a token. This object seemed like gold but wasn't gold. As she poured magic power into it, it emitted an extremely pure golden light, dignified and noble. I am Great Chu's 19th princess, Xiong Yuana. In order to save me, Captain Schur and the maid have all died. The guards were shocked. They naturally recognized the royal family token. They hurriedly fell to their knees. Lowly's servants didn't recognize the princess. I asked for the princess forgiveness. Xiong Yuena had a dignified expression. Those who don't know are not guilty. Moreover, you are all loyal guards. Once I escape this evil villain's plot, I will surely reward you. Lowly's servants pledged their lives to protect your highness. Xiong Yuena's eyes swept around. An imperceptible flash flashed. You, and you, enter the cave and bring out Captain Shi's corpse. The three guards who were chosen revealed a trace of panic in their eyes. They hurriedly entered the cave. Soon, the corpses of Captain Shi and the maid were brought out. But at this time, the three guards cried out miserably. Their bodies tumbled to the ground, and they soon died. The guards were restless. Xiong Yuena cried out, "This is bad. There's poison on the corpses. We have to leave immediately." No one objected. It was only at this time that the princess relaxed a little. Although she didn't know whether or not there were still spies amongst the guards, at least they were much safer. She asked around. It turned out that a powerful monster beast had suddenly appeared last night. The people who attacked the camp were forced to leave, allowing these guards to survive. She didn't know where the blown-up speed car came from, but the quality was simply amazing. After cleaning it up a bit, it could still be started. Xiong Yuena lowered her head, deep in thought. She carefully took out a hand phone, opened it, and then printed out a map. Then, she immediately turned it off. She closed her eyes. After several breaths of time, she handed the map to a guard. "There's a beast hunting battalion here. As long as we go there, we will be temporarily safe." 5 days later, a tired squad slowly entered the mountain range. The 10 guards were all wounded. It was clear they had experienced a series of fierce battles. "Stop! Who are you that you dare to trespass into the beast hunting battalion's restricted area?" Several guards were on high alert, but they didn't take another step forwards. This was because they could smell the thick scent of blood coming from these guards. It was clear that they were all veterans of 100 battles. Of course, the most important reason was that flying car with a tattered surface. The guards' cultivations might not be high, but after staying in the beast hunting battalion for a long time, their eyesight wasn't bad. Along the way, this speed car had clearly suffered many impacts, but it was still mostly intact. It was clearly extraordinary. Could it be some great figure that had entered the wilderness to hunt? As the guards were thinking this, the door to the car opened from the inside, and a dazzling woman stepped out. She wore a long and luxurious dress. The hem of her skirt was embroidered with auspicious clouds, and every line emitted formidable fluctuations of strength. Between her dark hair, there were only 3 or 4 hairpins. Beneath the sunlight, they shimmered with a divine light. Besides dazzling, the guards really didn't know how to describe her. A moment later, the Lord Commander arrived at the transmission mountain. After verifying the token, he respectfully said, "Honored guest, I ask you and your guards to enter the camp to rest." Qin Yu had gone into seclusion in search of a turning point for a breakthrough, but he didn't know that a great trouble had already entered the beast hunting battalion. After settling down the great Chu's 19th princess, the Lord Commander returned to his study. He wiped his face with a hot towel and sat down, a bit tired. Su Jiao put away the towel. She had a worried expression. "My lord, this matter isn't simple. The Great Chu Empire dominated the south, and its territory occupied nearly a quarter of the 7 great empires. Its strength was unrivaled under the heavens, and it could be said that it was the strongest in the world. The immortal sex and demonic path, what sort of influences were they? Even they had to make concessions in front of the Great Chu Empire, otherwise it would be difficult to spread their teachings. Such a princess had a status that was far more honored than the monarchs of some small countries. But it was clear that the princess who entered the camp today was being hunted down. Saying that she had been attacked by monster beasts was nothing more than a cover-up. The injuries of the guards and the marks left behind by the speed car were clearly the work of cultivators. The dignified Great Chu princess was being hunted down, and yet the princess herself wanted to cover it up. The profound meaning behind this was enough to make one shudder. The Lord Commander bitterly smiled. "Brother Su, you and I both know that this is an unexpected disaster." He paused for a moment, and then said, "People will die." Su Jiao was deeply worried. "My lord, since Her Highness is concealing this matter, we can only pretend that we don't know and send them away as soon as possible. I fear that Her Highness won't leave so easily." "Agree to all conditions," Su Jiao said in a low voice. "I believe that Her Highness won't force us into a desperate situation. Otherwise, it will be easy for something to happen." The Lord Commander faintly smiled. "Brother Su, you have quite the evil spirit. The South Shine Nation is a vassal state of the Great Chu. So how could you or I dare to move against Her Highness?" Su Jiao relaxed a little and became even calmer. "We naturally wouldn't dare to move against Her Highness, but if we can't provoke them, we can always hide. I don't think that Her Highness would want to see such a result. Haha, I'm lucky that Brother Su is here to help me solve this problem. My lord has a good plan. There is no need for me to solve it." The next day, the Lord Commander requested an audience with Her Highness. After a moment, he left and summoned all the high-level figures of the Beast Hunting Battalion for an emergency meeting. "Everyone, I have already ordered that Her Highness' status be sealed up. I hope that no one will casually reveal it to avoid trouble." The Lord Commander swept his eyes around. "All right, let's discuss the Noble One's request." Su Jiao stood up. "The Noble One has requested that our Beast Hunting Battalion provide some supplies and guards for her. Moreover, there must be at least 10 divine soul cultivators." After speaking, he nodded and sat down. The Lord Commander said, "The Noble One's safety is more important than anything else. The person you propose must be thoroughly controlled. Otherwise, if something goes wrong, both you and I will be out of luck." A general probed. "Has the Lord Commander asked for instructions from the Southern Overwatch Pass regarding the Noble One?" The Lord Commander had no expression. "The Noble One has asked us to keep this a secret." The meeting room fell silent. Everyone understood that this was sending people to their deaths. With the Lord Commander's reminder, these people had to be trusted aides. Thinking of this, the high-level figures of the Beast Hunting Battalion all had ugly complexions. To them, a divine soul realm trusted aide was an extremely important bargaining chip. But now, they would be thrown away in vain. The Lord Commander lightly said, "As the leader of the Beast Hunting Battalion, I am responsible for this matter. I am responsible for 3 spots." With these words, the atmosphere relaxed. There were still 7 spots left. Everyone only needed to send out 1 person to make up for it. An hour later, the list of 10 divine souls appeared, and the high-level figures hurried away. Following this, there were still many matters to be arranged. For instance, having subordinates willingly die. The guards that the Noble One wanted certainly weren't as simple as 10 divine souls. They also needed 100 nascent soul cultivators. Of course, in the eyes of the high-level figures, this was an extremely simple matter. Yuan Jingzhe returned to his study. After a brief pause, he paid a visit to 4 of his colleagues. Without spending too much time, he bid his farewells and returned. There was a knock on the door. Yuan Jingzhe said, "Come in." A white-haired cultivator with cloudy eyes pushed open the door. "Greetings, my lord." "Zheng Hai, are you clear on the situation?" "Yes, my lord." "Do you have any complaints?" "My life was saved by my lord." Yuan Jingzhe lightly said, "After you leave, I guarantee that I will take your son as my adopted son." Zheng Hai revealed an excited expression. He fell to his knees. "Thank you, my lord." A cold light flashed in Yuan Jingzhe's eyes. "Among the guards, there is a person named Qin Yu. I want you to personally kill him." Chapter 362. The complete list of guards was delivered to the commander's mansion. The 10 divine soul cultivators didn't change at all. After carefully reading through it, Su Jiao frowned. The Lord Commander didn't open his eyes. "What is it?" Su Jiao put down the list. "My lord, Qin Yu's name is on it." The commander grunted softly. Su Jiao remained silent. "Brother Su, do you think I should cross off his name?" Su Jiao cupped his hands across his chest. "Then must hold Qin Yu in high regard. Otherwise, they wouldn't have forcefully resisted Yuan Jingzhe's request." Placing him on the list might cause the inn to be dissatisfied and affect your future promotion. The commander nodded. What Brother Sue says is correct. But if someone is to blame for this matter, it shouldn't fall onto my head. Pausing for a moment, he continued, Moreover, the inn has indeed been in the limelight recently. Some people hope that I can find an opportunity to give them a warning. Su Jiao was startled. What a pity. This junior Qin Yu is quite good. The commander smiled. I can only say that his fate isn't good. Su Jiao said, to avoid conflict, Ji Hongruo might be a good choice. Then I'll have to trouble Brother Su. Su Jiao respectfully acknowledged. An hour later, Ani Hong gave some instructions and stepped into the transmission array, vanishing from sight. A big customer wanted to discuss the price with her. The other party's identity was not ordinary, so she had to show enough respect. Then, Qin Yu received orders from the beast hunting battalion. Song Song had a worried expression. Mr. Qin, could it be Yuan Jingzhe? Qin Yu smiled. This is the Lord Commander's order. I will return shortly. After leaving the inn, Qin Yu silently followed behind the messenger and soon arrived at the gathering point. This was a large military tent, and there were already dozens of cultivators here. Sweeping his gaze across, he relaxed slightly. Since there were so many people, there shouldn't be any problems. Looking at everyone's expressions, it seemed like they didn't know what was going on either. More and more cultivators were brought in. When there were 100 people, the tent was open from the outside. Yuan Jingzhe was the first to enter, followed by 10 divine soul cultivators. Greetings, my lord. Qin Yu's heart skipped a beat. He overturned his previous thoughts. It seemed that things weren't as simple as they seemed. Yuan Jingzhe said indifferently, I summoned all of you here today because I have a mission to hand over. Immediately, he briefly explained the situation. The general gist of it was that a noble of the Chu Empire was attacked by monster beasts in the wilderness and needed the beast hunting battalion to provide protection. Once they arrived at the receiving point, the mission would be considered complete. Remember, the noble status is extremely high. You must obey all orders. After this matter is over, you will be rewarded with generous points based on your performance. After saying all this, Yuan Jingzhe turned around and left. From start to finish, he did not look back. Qin Yu frowned. This was because a pair of eyes had been staring at him for a long time. Turning his head, he saw a white-haired divine soul cultivator. His turbid eyes were a bit vacant. The two of them looked at each other. He didn't seem to notice anything, as if he hadn't been paying attention to Qin Yu from the start. The tent was silent. Yuan Jingzhe had said it very simply, but there were not many fools in this world. 10 divine souls and 100 beast-hunting camp nascent souls were dispatched. This guard mission was definitely not simple. But even if they knew something was wrong, the orders of the high-level figures of the beast-hunting battalion weren't something they could resist. Luckily, there were 10 divine soul powerhouses accompanying them, allowing them to feel a bit more at ease. Soon, someone brought in new clothes. All traces of the beast-hunting battalion had to be erased from their bodies. Qin Yu carried the clothes in. With a thought, the demon god armor automatically transformed, and he placed the clothes in his storage ring. After everyone had finished packing, the 10 divine souls left the tent first and waited in silence. A speed car arrived. The Lord Commander personally sent them off. Noble one, be careful on your journey. The people of my beast-hunting battalion will do their best to ensure your safety. A woman lightly said, Thank you, Commander. The window of the car rose up. The group left the camp and entered a specially constructed transmission array. 120 people and a speed car were actually able to fit inside. With a flash of light, the figure in the array vanished from sight. The Lord Commander turned and left. After returning to his study, he hesitated for a moment and took out a jade slip. After marking a message on it, he crushed it. Although a hand phone was convenient, there was still the possibility of secrets being leaked. Thus, when it came to private matters, great figures still preferred to use outdated communication jade slips. With a light sigh, the Lord Commander leaned back in his chair, a weary look on his face. He didn't want to be involved in this, but in life, there were always times when he couldn't help himself. He hoped that this wouldn't provoke a disaster. In the wilderness, As a rich light surged, the figures of a squad of cultivators appeared. After a brief pause, the squad began to move towards a place where the sun shined down. The 10 divine souls solemnly moved forwards. The squad was quiet. Many beast-hunting battalion cultivators had ugly complexions. This was because the direction the squad was heading towards was deep into the wilderness. If the noble one of the Chu Empire was really in danger, then rushing to a city was the best choice. Something was wrong. An oppressive mood began to spread through the squad. Everyone was on high alert. The first day passed smoothly. When they set up camp at night, Qin Yu was arranged to keep watch. The flickering flames emitted a faint warmth in the cold darkness. Of course, the wood used to make the fire was some sort of sour branch wood. After it was burned, it emitted an aura that was strong enough to stimulate monster beasts, so there was no need to worry about attracting danger. In the middle of the night, just as the shift was about to end, there was a faint sound. Qin Yu frowned. He saw that half the window of the speed car had fallen down, revealing a woman's face. In the darkness, the dim flames weren't enough to clearly see her face. But Qin Yu's 5 senses were naturally superior, so he could clearly see her face in the weak light. This was a very beautiful girl. There was still a trace of childishness between her eyebrows. Perhaps it was because she was hidden in the darkness, but there was a trace of fear and confusion in her eyes. Qin Yu revealed a look of surprise. This was the noble one of the Chu Empire. There was the sound of footsteps. Someone had arrived to change shifts. The window slowly rolled up, covering the face. Qin Yu turned and left. He crawled into his sleeping bag and closed his eyes to meditate. The next day, the weather wasn't good. Some cultivators who were good at observing the skies judged that there would be a heavy rain around noon. Not only was there no worry, but there was even a bit of joy on their faces. This was because the rain would completely erase all traces and smells they left behind. And as expected, at noon, the rain began to pour down. When they pulled up their hats, the cold rainwater fell onto their bodies and flowed down, unable to seep through. But soon, everyone's complexions were no longer relaxed. This was because the rain became increasingly heavy. It was like a heavenly river had opened up, crashing down on them. The curtain of rain formed a waterfall, blocking out all sight. All they could see was a vast expanse of white. Qin Yu frowned. He looked up with some difficulty and saw a figure approaching from his left. Looking at their robes, they were clearly of a higher grade. The edges of their hats revealed a bit of white hair, causing him to narrow his eyes. He slowed down a bit. Soon, the 2 of them fell behind the group, one in front and one behind. The divine soul cultivators responsible for supervising the group and preventing anyone from escaping didn't seem to see this at all. They flew to the front of the group. Thus, between the endless curtain of water, there were only 2 people left. Qin Yu stopped. He turned around. Yuan Jingzhe? There was a bit of surprise in his cloudy eyes. You seem to be very confident. Qin Yu lightly said, You should know that divine soul cultivators aren't unkillable to me. Zheng Hai smiled. But I still came. He reached out a hand, allowing the rain to soak his palm. What a good rain. Before his voice fell, Zheng Hai stepped forwards. The curtain of rain for 1,000 feet around him instantly froze. His figure vanished. In the next moment, he emerged from the rain and lifted a hand. Qin Yu's pupil shrank. He raised his palm to block. His arm shook and the ground beneath his feet shattered. The raindrops around the 2 of them instantly exploded to pieces, condensing into a fine mist. Zheng Hai revealed a look of praise. No wonder Su Yunyan died under your hands. Who would have thought that a nascent soul like you would have such formidable combat strength? If we were to fight face to face, I might not be your match. But there is heavy rain today, and my strength is related to this rain. Before his voice fell, Zheng Hai vanished. Qin Yu stepped forwards, barely avoiding the attack by a hair's breadth. Zheng Hai had a calm expression. It's useless. The curtain of rain is my world. Where can you run to? He stepped out from the curtain of rain and brought his palm down again. Qin Yu didn't dodge at all. He met it with a fist. Zheng Hai's eyes brightened. He placed his palm on Qin Yu's chest and at the same time punched him. Bang! Within a radius of 500 feet, all the raindrops instantly shattered. Zheng Hai's complexion paled, but he actually smiled. You want to trade injury for injury? You won't be able to. Blood dripped from the corners of Qin Yu's lips. The might of a divine soul palm wasn't easy to bear. But at this time, his complexion didn't change at all. He lightly said, "What I want to trade for is my life." Zheng Hai furrowed his eyebrows. His figure instantly turned ethereal, wanting to blend into the curtain of rain. But the two of them were too close. Just as his figure was about to fade away, a translucent finger flew out from between Qin Yu's eyebrows and sank into his body. Thou art, boundless blue finger. Zheng Hai's body shook. His eyes widened in shock. Then all of the light faded away and he fell backwards, crashing into the mud. I'll trade my injury for your life. The curtain of rain within 1,000 feet began to flow once more. However, as the rumbling sound of rushing water entered Qin Yu's ears, his complexion changed. Without hesitation, he took a step forwards and his figure exploded outwards. He didn't run away, but caught up to the group and approached the speed car. Several divine soul cultivators looked over, shock in their eyes. But they didn't have time to think about this. This was because the raindrops falling from the skies suddenly stretched out, turning into transparent water swords. A rain of swords fell from the skies. This was not a beautiful song, but a prelude to harvesting lives. With panicked roars, boundless fluctuations of magic power erupted, shattering the water, swords to pieces. But the rain fell endlessly from the skies. Finally, some people couldn't withstand it. The rain swords pierced through their heads, causing blood to gush out. Once death began, it was impossible to stop. The 100 Beast Hunting Battalion nascent soul cultivators were rapidly being reduced. And at this time, the person who attacked hadn't even appeared. Controlling the rules, a divine soul cultivator paled. This was the might of a blue sea. Moreover, to have the ability to change the rules in such a large area, it was likely someone at the revered realm. Against such a terrifying existence, no matter how many divine soul cultivators there were, they would only be sending themselves to death. Protect the noble one. Hurry and run. The group instantly accelerated. No one cared about those that fell down. They could only pray that this formidable existence wouldn't directly attack because of his status. If so, then when they rushed through this curtain of rain, perhaps they would have a slim chance of survival. Qin Yu rushed forwards. The power of the 5 elements surged around him, shattering all the approaching water swords as he followed closely behind the speed car. The terrifying powerhouse that brought down the curtain of rain was targeting the Noble One in the speed car. But at the same time, the Noble One also had the strongest life-saving methods. Chapter 363. Heavy rain poured down and black clouds covered the sky. It was as if the curtain of night had descended. The temperature in the air began to drop. It became colder and colder, as if it was about to penetrate one's bones. The transparent rain swords falling from the sky condensed into bone-piercing ice swords, their killing power increasing exponentially. More and more figures screamed and fell to the ground, nailed to death by the dense ice swords. The flying car emitted muffled bangs, and the radiance on its surface grew dimmer and dimmer. It wouldn't last much longer. Protect the Noble One, a divine soul cultivator roared out. With a flick of his sleeves, magic power condensed into clouds that protected the speed car. As the ice sword pierced into the cloud, it was as if it had sunk into a swamp. Its speed rapidly decreased, and it was no longer able to cause any damage. However, right at this moment, the ice sword that was falling towards the flying chariot suddenly began to spin on its own, forming an ice sword vortex. Puff, puff! With a muffled sound, the cloud was cut into pieces in the blink of an eye. Not too far away, the divine soul cultivator who attacked froze where he was. In the next moment, his body shattered into countless pieces, dyeing the ground red. The ice swords that had shattered the clouds had actually followed the source of his aura and killed him as well. Schwa, the ice sword vortex disappeared, its terrifying might dispersing. It continued to fall on the flying carriage, shattering into pieces. The remaining 8 divine souls paled. This was clearly a warning to them that they couldn't help the noble one on the speed car. Whoever helped would die. A divine soul revealed a distressed expression. He teleported above the speed car and flicked his sleeves to shatter the ice sword. The next moment, the surface of his body froze, and the ice sword shattered it into pieces. "Everyone, I'll be leaving first." Another divine soul laughed bitterly, blocking the sky above the flying carriage. In the next instant, a sword pierced through his chest. The tip of the ice sword pierced through the flying car and nailed him to it. Before leaving the beast hunting battalion, the 10 divine soul cultivators already knew that this mission would be a suicide mission. But there was a difference between having the determination to die and helplessly sending themselves to their deaths. The remaining 6 divine soul cultivators all revealed looks of fear. Fortunately, at this time, the noble in the speed car came to their rescue. "You don't need to do anything. I can do it myself." It was unknown what the noble one did, but the surface of the flying carriage actually ignited with a layer of golden flames. The flame leaped about quietly, unaffected by the outside world, and did not emit the slightest bit of heat. However, when the ice swords entered it, they disappeared in the blink of an eye. This showed how terrifying it was. The 6 divine souls relaxed. They hurried forwards with all their strength. From afar, they could see the end of the black clouds above their heads. If he could get out of this area, he might be able to survive. In the entire team, there were only a few nascent soul cultivators left, and they stuck close to the flying car. It was because those who weren't smart enough had already fallen on the road, chopped into meat paste. Most of the ice swords falling from the sky were attracted by the flying car. Following it would reduce the pressure. However, the flying car was only so big. The number of people who could approach it was destined to be limited. "Brat, get the hell out of my way!" The Scar Man roared, his hand suddenly slapping out. Chinyu furrowed his eyebrows. He raised his hand and punched out. With a dull thumping sound, his body didn't move at all, but the big fellow was sent flying backwards with wide eyes. The energy that invaded his body wreaked havoc, causing him to lose his ability to defend himself. In the blink of an eye, his body was pierced by 17 or 18 ice swords, and he fell heavily to the ground, dead. This scene caused the pupils of the surrounding cultivators to constrict. As time passed, the power of the ice swords grew stronger and stronger. Even the golden flames on the surface of the flying car were unable to extinguish them. Wounds of varying depths appeared on the car. The cultivators following the flying car also suffered great misfortune. With miserable screams, 3 people died, leaving only 4 people alive. The situation was becoming increasingly dire. There were 2 doors on the left and right of the flying car. Perhaps because the glass was damaged and needed more strength to protect it, the golden flames covered a much larger area. By staying close to it, one could reduce the attacks of the ice swords. Chinyu occupied one of the doors, and the other was occupied by a pale-faced cultivator. As for the remaining 2 people, they began to reveal ill intent. Because they had sent the scarred man to his death with a single punch, their eyes fell on the pale-faced cultivator first. One of them suddenly attacked. He punched out, and 9 fist phantoms appeared. This wasn't some fancy technique, because each of the 9 fist phantoms emitted a powerful aura. When he punched out, there were actually 9 fist phantoms superimposed on each other. This was the same as erupting with 9-fold combat strength. The pale-faced cultivator's eyes flashed open. What was different from his pale face was that his eyes were exceptionally bright, like stars in the clear winter sky. The 9 fist phantoms didn't have time to erupt. They gently trembled and then vanished like an illusion. Ha! The cultivator who attacked fell backwards. He was stabbed by the ice swords until he looked like a hedgehog. Luckily, he had died before he fell, so he didn't feel the pain of 10,000 arrows piercing through his heart. His body shivered, and his complexion paled even further. But his eyes brightened. He glanced at the other cultivator and then slowly closed his eyes. Cold sweat soaked his robes. The person who hadn't attacked first had a look of joy on his face. Luckily, he had waited patiently, otherwise he would have died already. This person was far too terrifying. He actually grasped the killing power of the soul. He absolutely couldn't be provoked. That left only Chinyu. He clenched his teeth and took a step forwards. Magic power erupted from his body. Chinyu flicked his sleeves. All of the ice swords within 1,000 feet were instantly turned to powder. The cultivator stiffened. He had galvanized his strongest magic power, but it was like he had been struck in the head and most of it scattered. With a stuffy cough, blood gushed out from his nose and mouth. He had actually been injured by the vibrations of magic power and was instantly killed by the ice swords. On the other door, the pale-faced cultivator opened his eyes, a deep dread in them. But Chinyu didn't even look at him. He continued on his way. This person naturally didn't dare to provoke him. Beyond the black clouds, atop an ancient tree that supported the heavens, a blue-clothed cultivator stood with his hands crossed behind his back. The space in front of him twisted, covering his face so that others couldn't see him clearly. "Revered Rain, they are about to escape," the black-clothed cultivator said with a frown. There was a hint of arrogance in his eyes. It was clear his status wasn't ordinary. Revered Rain lightly said, "I have already attacked. Since she hasn't died, that is her luck." The black-clothed cultivator anxiously said, "Revered Rain, you have already received the reward, so how can you go back on your word?" Revered Rain chuckled. "I only promised to help, but I never said I would kill her. So, this is an offense against me." Another person hurriedly said, "Revered Rain, please show mercy." Puff! The black-clothed cultivator's head exploded. Red and white matter flew out, and his headless corpse fell to the ground. After a long time, there was a loud bang. Revered Rain faintly said, "To offend a blue sea is a crime worthy of death." The remaining cultivators fell silent out of fear. None of them dared to say a single word. With a step forwards, Revered Rain vanished from sight. In the distance, the group of people also paid a heavy price and managed to walk out alive. To offend Great Monarch Blue Sea, death cannot wipe out their crimes. According to the rules, I will take over the authority. Even if these people manage to walk out alive, they will be exhausted to the extreme. I order an all-out attack. You and I will attack and send them to hell. Yes. Whoosh, whoosh. The cultivators on top of the ancient trees jumped down one after another. With a shout, over 100 figures appeared, shuttling back and forth between the ancient trees as they rapidly approached. With the sound of breaking air, the pale-faced cultivator who had rushed through the rain of swords with Chin Yu was instantly pierced through the neck by an arrow. There was a look of joy on his face, as if he had just survived a calamity. But his eyes were filled with fear as he fell backwards. Looking at the overwhelming black-clothed cultivators rushing towards them, the 6 divine soul cultivators revealed a relaxed expression. Dying in a bloody battle was better than dying in such a sullen manner like before. Placing themselves in a perilous situation, the 6 divine souls didn't hold anything back. They erupted with an extremely terrifying strength. Although there were over 15 divine souls among the black-clothed cultivators, they were still stubbornly entangled, unable to take a single step past the defensive line. "All of you go. Kill everyone on the chariot, and everyone will be richly rewarded." A massive number of black-clothed cultivators rushed forwards, their eyes blazing hot and cruel. After Chin Yu left the curtain of rain, he had already left the chariot. Just as he was about to leave, he didn't escape the eyes of the black-clothed cultivators. "The Lord has ordered that no one is allowed to escape. Kill him." A squad of black-clothed cultivators turned and rushed forwards, their eyes relaxed. Compared to killing the people on the chariot, they were far more willing to kill this little insect. That was the Chu Empire's princess. As soon as this thought appeared, They couldn't help but shiver. They had already attacked, and there was no turning back. Only by not revealing even a single detail would they have a chance of surviving. So this little insect had to die. Kill. Dazzling saber light swept out like a vast tide, sealing away Qin Yu's entire body. Bang! With a heaven-shaking explosion, dust rose up from the ground. But the complexions of those who attacked changed because they didn't smell blood. Whoosh! 2 people rushed in. Soon, they angrily roared, "He isn't here. Find him. We cannot let him run away." Once today's events were leaked out, all of them would be silenced. Shua, 2 divine soul cultivators arrived. Of the beast-hunting battalion's 6 divine souls, 1 had already died. Useless things, go kill the people on the chariot. We will chase after this little insect. The 2 divine souls teleported away. When revered Rain attacked, just now, although he wasn't able to kill him, this little insect's body was still stained with the aura of the rules. To the 2 divine souls, this aura was like a lighthouse in the dark night. They were naturally confident in themselves. Qin Yu walked out from the shadows. His complexion changed, and he turned and stepped back in. He vanished from sight, and the 2 divine souls appeared. They coughed, and their eyes became even colder. "You can't escape." Shua. The 2 teleported away. After using Shadow Step over a dozen times, he was caught up to every time. Qin Yu knew that there must be some reason why he couldn't escape their pursuit. He couldn't continue like this. Otherwise, once the slaughter on the other side ended and more divine soul cultivators gathered, he would be in danger. Qin Yu walked out from the shadows. He didn't run away anymore. Instead, he coldly looked forwards. Space rippled, and 2 divine souls walked out. "Little insect, why aren't you running anymore?" He stepped forwards. The ground cracked, and Qin Yu exploded outwards. He didn't have any thoughts of speaking nonsense. Since the 2 of them were careless, he naturally had to seize the opportunity. Caught off guard, one of the divine souls hurriedly attacked and collided with Qin Yu. 5-colored divine light instantly erupted. White, black, blue, red, and yellow wove together. The divine soul cultivator miserably cried out as half of his body exploded. Shua, his soul escaped, his face filled with anger and hatred. "Brat, I want you to die without a grave." A vortex quietly appeared beneath Qin Yu's feet. A terrifying suction force erupted, and the divine soul cultivator's soul cried out in pain as he was pulled in. The second divine soul cultivator turned to flee. But at this time, a bronze mirror appeared in Qin Yu's hand. Shua, the soul setting divine light, fell on this person's body. He stiffened, unable to move at all. Qin Yu flew forwards and smashed apart this person's head with a palm. The shadow vortex swallowed up the soul as usual. In several breaths of time, the 2 divine soul cultivators died on the spot, their bodies and souls destroyed. Chapter 364. In the wilderness, Qin Yu's nose and mouth were filled with the rotting smell of fallen leaves. He buried his head in them and used the shadows to rapidly fly away. He used Shadow Step dozens of times and ran several hundred miles away. In the wilderness, this was considered a safe distance. But when the 2 divine soul cultivators chased him like maggots, Qin Yu knew that he had been locked onto for some reason. Before he could figure out the reason, he could only run as far away as possible in order to avoid being hunted down. Otherwise, with over a dozen divine souls chasing after him, no matter how powerful he was, he would die without a doubt. The reason he killed those 2 divine souls was because they had been careless, and he also had the might of the copper mirror spirit treasure. It wasn't as simple as it seemed. The skies gradually darkened, and night arrived once more. Qin Yu stopped. He took out several pills and swallowed them. Then he sat down cross-legged in the shadows and began to refine the medicinal efficacy. Using Shadow Step again and again took a tremendous toll on his body. Moreover, Qin Yu could faintly feel that the summoned life form hiding in the shadows had weakened by a great deal. It was clear that Shadow Step mainly relied on its strength. He feared that after using it a few more times, Shadow Step would fail. Qin Yu revealed a look of hesitation. He had the Deva soul in his hands, and after refining it, he could immediately become a divine soul. But now, he was only a fine line away from making a breakthrough. Moreover, he had already fled nearly 1,000 miles away. No matter how powerful a divine soul cultivator's soul was, they still might not be able to sense him. Qin Yu suppressed the thought of using the Deva soul and focused on refining it. An hour later, he opened his eyes, a sharp light flashing within them. Although he hadn't recovered yet, he couldn't stay here any longer. Just as he was about to use Shadow Step to leave, his complexion suddenly changed. Bang! The space in front of him collapsed without warning. A woman staggered out. Her luxurious and exquisite dress was now in tatters. The two people's gazes collided, and they were both frightened. Qin Yu forcefully pulled back his fist. After a moment of astonishment, his complexion became incomparably ugly. This woman was none other than the noble lady from the state of Chu who had been in the flying carriage. Qin Yu didn't know how she escaped, but he was sure of one thing. She was about to bring great trouble to him. The noble one also seemed to recognize Qin Yu. Looking at his ugly complexion, it wasn't hard to guess what he was thinking. A cold light shined in her eyes. Just as she was about to say something, a deep green jade pendant on her chest suddenly shattered into powder. The noble one's complexion changed, revealing a bit of panic. Then, in the next moment, a terrifying suppression gushed out from the entire space. Whither are you going to escape? Die obediently, and both of us will be free. With an icy cold voice, 14 figures walked out from the space distortion, each one emitting a powerful aura of the divine soul realm. The cultivator's entire face was covered by a black cloth, revealing only a pair of sharp eyes. As he looked at Qin Yu, he was a bit surprised. Then, he chuckled and said, "I never thought you would help us find this little insect. It seems we've saved ourselves some trouble." He waved his hand. The eyes of a divine soul cultivator behind him lit up, and he glared at Qin Yu. A cold chill gushed out from the depths of his soul. But in the blink of an eye, this cold chill was crushed apart. Schwa. Within his soul space, Spirity opened her eyes. She lifted a hand and grasped the air. "Ah!" The divine soul cultivator cried out miserably. Blood gushed out from his nose and mouth as he slumped to the ground. The pupils under the black cloth fiercely shrank. "The two people who chased you before should have died. You little bug, you're really unexpected. Die." With a loud shout, he stepped forwards and slammed his hand down. His tyrannical soul might have come from some fortuitous encounter, but his cultivation couldn't be faked. Nascent soul was nascent soul. The disparity between it and divine soul was unimaginable. Moreover, he was a dignified 9th-level divine soul. Killing this person would be as easy as flipping his hand. Qin Yu cursed inwardly. If there was a medicine for regret, he would definitely buy 10 of them and then refine the Deva soul without hesitation. What was the point of breaking through? Even if he wanted to refine it now, it was already too late. There was no time to think. A cruel and ruthless aura rushed towards him, causing his heart to shiver. He drew back, wanting to use Shadow Step to escape. As for the noble one of the Chu Empire, "I'm sorry, but you're on your own." But as soon as he moved, Qin Yu discovered that something was wrong. The suppressive strength that flooded the space actually restricted his Shadow Step. Without any other choice, Qin Yu could only forcefully block this fist. Unfortunately, he lost the initiative. With a stuffy cough, he was forced backwards. His feet plowed a long furrow in the wilderness. The eyes behind the black cloth became even colder. "Junior, I never thought you would have such formidable combat strength. It looks like I really underestimated you." A nascent soul could forcefully block his fist, and his soul was also inconceivably powerful. Even in the land of divinity and demons, this sort of person would be considered a peak proud son of heaven. But what a pity, he would definitely die today. With a loud shout, the assassin leader approached once more. He lifted his hand and pressed it down. Bang! With a loud explosion, the assassin's eyes widened. Within the tumbling air currents, his body was sent flying backwards, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Cough, cough. Impossible. Just who are you? The assassin leader shouted out loud, his eyes filled with anger. He had actually been injured in a battle, and his opponent was only a mere nascent soul. This brat is strange. Don't let him escape. Join hands and kill him. With loud roars, the remaining 12 divine soul cultivators instantly separated, surrounding Chinyu. They formed hand seals together, and runes appeared around them. They spun in the air, condensing into a mountain. Chinyu's complexion changed. The space around him froze, and a boundless pressure surged forwards. It was like a mountain was pressing down on him. Peepa! Peepa! His bones trembled and groaned. There was a sudden movement beneath his feet. Chinyu lowered his head, speechless. The Chu Empire's noble one hugged his thigh, her body shivering. He suddenly had a feeling that one couldn't judge a book by its cover. She looked like she was flat, but he didn't expect her chest to be so thick. As soon as this thought appeared, Chinyu couldn't help but spit on himself. Did he feel like he was about to die? He actually had such a dirty thought. Above his head, the pressure from the mountain phantom became increasingly great. Chinyu's complexion immediately changed. He never thought that this suppressing killing technique would become increasingly strong as time passed. If this continued, he would be crushed to pieces sooner or later. His vision began to blur. Traces of warm blood flowed out from his head. He could almost hear the faint cracking sounds coming from the bones in his body. Within his soul space, Spirity had a conflicted expression. After a long time, she sighed and turned into a beam of light that fused into Chinyu's soul. In that moment, the feeling of their souls fusing together was so stimulating that she couldn't help but cough out loud. She restrained her thoughts and began to quietly chant. The young girl's voice turned into simple syllables that reverberated within his soul space. A strange fluctuation appeared with it. After an unknown period of time, a clear shattering sound rang out from within Chinyu's soul, as if some invisible shackles had been broken. Spirity flew out, her eyes shining with a bright light. She turned and vanished from sight, hiding somewhere unknown. Shwa! Chinyu opened his eyes. The world in front of him hadn't changed, but it was also different. He revealed a blank look. How did he suddenly make a breakthrough? Could it be because of this mountain peak? Chinyu felt that something wasn't right, but before he had time to think about it, he was shrouded in an invisible suppression above his head. Rumble, rumble, thunder roared in the skies. Billowing black clouds gushed out from nothingness. The assassin cultivators looked up in astonishment. Their eyes subconsciously widened in disbelief. This was actually the legendary breakthrough on the spot. The leader's eyes shook. When Chinyu was at the peak of nascent soul, he already had the strength to injure him. Once he made a breakthrough, hurry and kill him. With a loud roar, the leader lifted a hand and pressed down. The entire suppressing killing mountain emitted a thunderous roar. Chinyu stuffily coughed. His feet sank into the ground, but a cold sneer appeared in his eyes. Although he hadn't crossed tribulation yet, he had already broken through that barrier. His 5 elements' nascent souls were transforming, and his strength was rapidly increasing. This killing mountain couldn't kill him. Rumble! Within the black clouds, a bolt of thunder came roaring down. It was like a winding lightning flood dragon as it smashed down on Chinyu. Originally, when the heavenly tribulation was obstructed, it would directly teleport over. However, the killing mountain that the assassins had set up had completely covered the entire space. Therefore, the first to suffer the heavenly tribulation was the suppression mountain peak, or to be more precise, the assassins who set up the suppression technique. Miserable screams filled the air. The 12 divine soul cultivators were sent flying away. Their eyes widened in horror. What kind of heavenly tribulation was this? Its power was actually so great. The leader coughed up blood. His injuries worsened, and his chest felt incredibly tight. However, he heaved a sigh of relief. Fortunately, the power of this divine soul, heavenly tribulation was ridiculously terrifying. Even if this kid was monstrous, he would definitely be heavily injured. At that time, he would naturally be able to kill him. Retreat. Don't go near the heavenly tribulation. With a low growl, the assassin's divine souls hurriedly dodged. Bang! Lightning submerged Chinyu. The noble one shivered. She subconsciously screamed and hugged the thigh in her arms even tighter. She had no idea that by doing this, she had already given away a great deal of tofu. She had thought that she would die, but being struck to death by heavenly tribulation still surpassed her imagination. How come it doesn't hurt? Could I have already died? The noble one opened her eyes and discovered that the owner of the thigh she was hugging was now like a human-shaped black hole. All of the heavenly tribulation thunder that fell onto him instantly vanished from sight. The two of them were together, and yet she wasn't attacked by the strength of heavenly tribulation at all. After surviving a calamity, the noble one gasped for breath. Her chest heaved up and down, and Chinyu's complexion couldn't help but turn strange. Luckily, under the cover of the lightning, no one could see his expression. Bang! Before the first bolt of heavenly tribulation disappeared, a second bolt of tribulation thunder ruthlessly descended. The divine soul assassins were all amazed. They wondered just how many things that boy had done to anger the heavens that he would actually draw such a terrifying heavenly tribulation. Their eyes fell onto the ground. The blinding lightning and the endless power of thunder spread out, as if a pool of thunder had appeared out of thin air. Beneath this terrifying power of thunder, even the earth was destroyed into nothingness. As the divine soul assassins watched the two people collapse into a giant pit, their hearts relaxed. This boy and the noble one had definitely perished in body and soul. Strictly speaking, the two of them had died under heavenly tribulation. It had nothing to do with them. Thinking of this, everyone's eyes were filled with joy. After all, the rumors of the Chu Empire's royal bloodline being cursed was something that no one wanted to experience. Bang, bang, tribulation thunder crashed down one after another. The number far surpassed that of ordinary divine, soul, heavenly tribulation. In the end, the eyes of the divine soul assassins began to turn numb. Moreover, the divine souls began to worry. With such a large disturbance in the wilderness, if a powerful monster beast were to be drawn in, that would be disastrous. As if sensing the thoughts of the divine soul assassins, a strong wind swept past. The thick black clouds in the skies began to dissipate without warning. The heavenly tribulation had ended. Hashtag that you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.